Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the Everything is Fine podcast. I am your host, Matt Ebersol,
I am your host, Sean Wilson.
and today we are wrapping up our MCU trilogy of episodes. Today we're going to be talking about Phase 3, and once again, we have a lovely guest joining us. Please welcome our good friend Caroline to the show. Caroline, how are you doing
Oh,
today?
I'm doing just fantastic. I am thrilled to be here.
Yeah, it should be a lot of fun. What the viewers did not see is 15 minutes before this show started, Caroline and I got to know each other by arguing about sports. So today should be a lot of fun.
I am so excited.
Sean, how are you today?
Well, I just listened to 15 minutes of sports, so, I'm good as I can get.
Sounds about right. Well, we have a lot to cover today, so there's no need lollygagging around the topic. We have 11 movies to cover today because for some reason Marvel decided to make Phase 3 twice as long as Phase 1 and Phase 2. So we might as well get started. But before we get started, of course, Sean, you have some current events, some headlines to cover, so might as well get those out of the way first. Sean, take it
I
away.
do. I have only 5 things for us today, just very miscellaneous things. That because we need all the time we can get. We have 11 films to get through. So, over the past weekend, Indiana Jones' fedora, which he wore in Temple of Doom, was sold in an art house auction, and it sold for $300,000, making it one of the most expensive props from the Indiana Jones franchise to ever be sold.
Imagine having $300,000 lying around to just buy someone's hat from 1984. I think that movie came out in 84. That's nuts.
But yeah, just a simple little art house auction. The Last of Us show for HBO also entered production over the weekend as well, and I'm very excited for that.
Ah,
I'm going to talk about
yes,
it every
Sean's
every
weekly
time.
Last of Us headline.
Every time that I
Caroline,
hear
have you
news
played
about it.
Last of Us?
I played the first one, and then I watched playthroughs of the other one. I was underwhelmed.
Oh, I thought they were both fantastic.
Don't get in an argument with Sean about Last of Us or
You just talked
our
about
good friend Connor
sports.
because they'll. I understand that, but like you love Last of Us like it's your first and second child, and if anyone hates them, you're just like no, and here's why, and it's like yeah.
That's fair.
So
That's fair. That's fair.
Sean loves it. Sean loves his games.
I
It's
do. I
okay.
love my games. Moving on, my third headline is Amazon recently released The Tomorrow War, which I'm sure everyone has seen advertisements for it all over the place. However, IGN stepped up and put its reviewers to the test, and they gave it a 3. IGN doesn't give 3s. They barely even give 5s. They gave it a 3. They said that Chris Pratt flounders to keep this movie alive. The plot is barely inconceivable, and the monsters look terrible. Like, not even scary. Just like, this is bad. So, yeah, it was hot garbage by IGN standards.
Yes, Mrs. Lincoln, but how was the play? Ah,
Yeah. So IGN really hated this movie.
oh my gosh. Yeah, I had no interest in seeing that movie anyway, but after that rave review, I don't even know if I want to even bother now. I mean, oh my god, that's brutal. That's
You know, I'm
horrible.
definitely going to watch it.
Oh, yeah, we almost have to watch it.
Yeah.
To see what
Is it?
IGN...
I wonder though if it's one of those movies. I wonder if it's one of those movies though that's like, is it so bad it's good, or is it just a terrible film? Like,
They made it
maybe
sound
maybe I
like...
should watch it. Who
They
knows?
made it sound like the latter, but we'll never know unless we try.
All right. I mean, it is on Amazon Prime, so if you are a Prime Video subscriber and if you have that streaming service, you can watch it. Advisory if you do, because apparently it's bad. So just be warned. I wasn't expecting much. It just looked like another mindless action movie starring a big Hollywood name that will draw attention and God,
Yeah.
this looked terrible.
Speaking of Hollywood and movies and other terrible decisions, no one, and I mean no one, asked for this, but we got a trailer a couple days ago for the live-action Clifford the Big Red Dog movie. And I've seen the trailer, and I can report and I can give you my honest opinion that this did not need to get made. Clifford live action as a seemingly CGI lifelike red dog looks like something out of Lovecraft's worst nightmares. And I was frightened by this trailer. I'm not gonna lie. I'm a grown man. I felt afraid watching this.
Scarier than Tomorrowland?
Yeah.
Honestly, like it was not. Inspired no confidence. It looks terrifying. I don't understand who asked for this movie. I don't understand why anyone thought that this was the property that needed the CGI treatment. But it happened.
Yeah. I mean, and when I heard they're making a Clifford the Big Red Dog movie, I'm like, oh, so they're making like a cartoon. Like I remember they made a Curious George movie back in the day. They made other stuff too, and I'm just like, why is this, like? No one asked. Like, the Curious George movie was still a cartoon. They didn't get a real monkey to play George. Why do you need an actual? It looks horrifying. Also, I apologize. People are shooting off fireworks across the street, so that's fun.
Hey,
I don't know if
America.
you can hear them.
But yeah, there's that. My last little bit of news is more so just me geeking out. Magic the Gathering, which is one of the many companies, or not companies, one of the many products that Wizards of the Coast produces, has announced its next set, which is dropping on the 22nd, I believe, of July this month. They are doing a Forgotten Realms set, which is a beloved landscape from Dungeons and Dragons. A couple years ago, we got Guildmaster's Guide to Ravnica, which was the first ever Dungeons and Dragons Magic the Gathering crossover, where players got to read through the notes of Ravnica as a playable world and a place for campaigns. Now we have the opposite end of that trade. We are getting an entire card set around the Forgotten Realms' most iconic characters and spells and mechanics from Dungeons & Dragons. I've seen the set. I've seen almost all the spoilers. As of this date, I would say that 3/4 of the entire set has been revealed. And there are a lot of cards and mechanics that call back to the nostalgia of D&D and the wonderful actual playing aspects of it. However, from the purely logical Magic side of my brain, it's definitely not going to be one of the greatest sets mechanically, but the stuff that is good and calls back is really good. So it's a set with a couple of hidden gems in it, and if anything, I'm going to still play a lot of this set because it's my two favorite things in the whole wide world as a nerd. And that's all I needed. I just needed to nerd out about that for a minute. If you've ever played Magic, you've ever played D&D, pick up these cards. It'll be fun. But that's all I got.
Fair enough. All right. I mean, I don't play either of these games. Caroline, do you have any experience in Magic and D&D? Because I sure
I
don't.
do actually play D&D. I'm in a campaign with Sean.
Very fun.
Yes, we both are our friend Colleen being mentioned on the show before, Connor's girlfriend. We've played in her campaign all summer.
I see. Very fun. Yeah, I can't relate to that at all. So I'm happy that you're happy, Sean.
Thank you, Matt. Thank you. But with all of that out of the way, we have Phase 3 to discuss, and we have a lot of movies to get through.
Yep. So before we get started, though, I do want to first ask Caroline if she wants to share anything about her Marvel experience, why she's here, anything you want to tell our audience. The floor is yours before we get going.
Well, Marvel, it was interesting for me. I didn't discover Marvel until middle school because my parents were never into it, and I watched Avengers in theaters, and I was just like infatuated with Black Widow. And then I was like, oh my goodness, I gotta watch all these movies. And then she wasn't even in a lot of them up until later, but I had like her posters in my room, and that's when I fell down the Marvel rabbit hole, definitely.
Very cool. But yeah, we have a lot to get to, and beginning Phase 3. So Phase 2 ended with Age of Ultron, which is Sean's favorite movie for some reason, and Ant-Man in 2015. We then in 2016, this year that we saw Batman versus Superman, which was take it or leave it if you like it or not. I didn't, but some people did, some people didn't. We got a similar concept in the MCU to kick off Phase 3, where we saw our two beloved heroes fight it out in a different way. And that was with Captain America Civil War, also known as Avengers 2.5, which is a. I mean, I guess we'll get started. I love this movie. I think it's so good. I think it is. I have an argument to make about it later, but I'll let you two start talking about it first as well before I get into my argument regarding this movie. But I think that it is amazing for what it does for these characters. I think Iron Man is so well written, and it introduces two fan favorites. It introduces Spider-Man, and it introduces Black Panther, which is really cool. But yeah, I'll get more into it later if any of you want to take the reins now. But yeah, I like this movie a lot.
This was a very strong start. I will give it that. It was a very strong start for Phase 3. We had so much given to us in all the press conferences leading up to it. And, of course, for all of us comic book nerds, having read the various Civil War comic lines, expected a lot of this film. And it was good. It delivered on some of that. But there were certainly some moments of underwhelm that came with this film. There were certainly some moments that you didn't see coming at all with this film, mostly being Black Panther and of especially Spider-Man's introductions. This was just a very good. It almost felt like the first class back of the semester. You know what I mean? Like, this is great. We're gonna have a great time. Here's what's to come. You know, that's my thoughts overall.
Fair enough, Caroline.
This movie, I think I was underwhelmed from the standpoint of all the hype that was surrounding this movie, like all the merch, everything that was like all the advertising for this movie. I was expecting it. I don't know what I was expecting. I do really love the movie. I think I just expected a little bit more out of it, but I do think it was a good start to Phase 3. And it was very interesting to see the characters, because you've seen conflicts in the original Avengers, and it was very interesting to see that release and to see them split up into different ways. I like that, because you don't see that a lot in other movies, where usually it's all the heroes working together, and there is no conflict, and it's all like very happy. But it was nice to see them go a different route.
Yeah, I mean, I see your point, Sean. I'm talking. I know Caroline loved the movie. I know Sean said he thought it was good, not great. I see your point. I read the originals when they came out. I think that was like 2005, 2006, something like that. And this movie goes in a completely different route. It deals with a lot more different things. It also doesn't have the wide array of characters that the Civil War comic had, because Marvel didn't have the rights to everybody at that point. They didn't have the X-Men, Fantastic Four, stuff like that. So it's much more smaller in scale. And I think everyone was expecting this movie to just be this huge fight scene and a lot of battles and a lot of action. But I love the fact that it really takes its time to dive deep into these characters and their motivation. Because this is the movie that defines Tony for the rest of the MCU going forward. Because now he is no longer driven by his ego. He's no longer driven by his fears like he was in Age of Ultron. He is now solely driven by one thing, and that is guilt. He's driven by his guilt because he couldn't save the people that he thought he could save. And he takes the whole first part of the movie to deal with that. I love what they do with Cap's character, with Peggy passing away and realizing that there's literally no one left from his past anymore. And he now has to live in this new world that he doesn't know. And I love Black Panther's introduction. I think Tom Holland is the best on-screen Spider-Man. I think he's better than Tobey Maguire personally. And I think that Zemo is a fantastic villain. Even though everyone says you don't need a villain, I think you absolutely do. Because without Zemo, you don't get that final battle between Tony, Cap, and Bucky, which is one of the most emotionally tragic and most investing scenes in all the MCU, when Tony watches the video of Bucky killing his parents. That scene just crushes me every time. And here's my main argument. This movie is the most important MCU movie. And I'll tell you why. Because without it, if Cap and Tony don't have that last thing where he finds out that Bucky killed his parents, Tony and Cap's relationship is now completely broken. As Zemo said, an empire that crumbles because of its enemies, that can rise again. But one that falls from within, that's dead forever. I think that this movie does a great job of setting that up, and because of the fact that their relationship is so damaged, it then leads into Infinity War, where they're not together, they're divided, and because of that fact, they don't defeat Thanos. Without this movie, Infinity War is not as compelling as it is, and we don't get Endgame because we don't get the satisfaction of Cap and Tony reuniting. Without this movie, we literally do not have the rest of Phase 3. This movie does everything it needed to do, and that's why I love it.
I don't think I've ever thought of it from that point of view.
I can definitely concur. I can definitely agree. I can see your points.
That's my main argument that I wanted to make, because I have been a defender of this movie since it came out. And I think if you watch this movie, and if you don't go back and forth between if you're rooting for Cap or you're rooting for Tony or who you side with, then I think you're just fixated on one of them. Because if you're actually watching the film, they do such a great job of making compelling arguments for both sides. And it's hard not to flip and flop between the two. And I think that if a movie is able to do that, then it's doing a good job. And even more so. So I love this movie, but I totally get why people don't like it, because maybe some expectations going into it were different. But I think this movie did everything it needed to do. And that ending that might be my top 2 or 3 favorite scenes in Marvel. That fight of Cap and Bucky versus Tony at the end. I think it's so good. Oh my God, it's fantastic.
More the second time I watched it, because I wasn't going into it, because when I went into it, I like Iron Man more than I like Captain America, which is, I know, controversial in and of itself. But I was going into it like, oh yeah, Team Iron Man. And I think I read something somewhere where it was like, neither of them are correct. They're both wrong. They both have aspects that are good, but they're not. They're both too extreme. And I think the second time I watched it, I was like, okay, yeah, I have to go into this knowing, like, honestly, both of them are crazy. They're both taking it to an extreme, and they have to come and find a middle ground. So I enjoyed it more the second time I watched it. I think I was just underwhelmed the first time.
Plus, there's also the argument of making, not really an argument, but it's a point that in the Avengers, they have an argument saying how Tony is very selfish, he's very arrogant, he's making decisions just for himself, and he's being very in his own head, whereas Cap is trying to think about the greater good, and he's very much, a soldier, the American way. And in this movie, it's the exact opposite. It's Tony that wants to do the right thing for everybody else and is very selfless. And Cap is now the one who's saying, no, we need to do what's right for us. We can't become puppets. I think it's so cool that literally within, I guess it's like 6 movies, because the Avengers was the end of Phase 1, and this is the beginning of Phase 3. There was just Phase 2. They took Phase 2 to completely flip both characters in terms of their stances and ideologies. And it feels organic, and that's why I love the overall writing of this franchise. And praise the Russo brothers to no end, because they are the kings of writing good Marvel movies and writing good character arcs. I love them.
I will agree.
But I digress.
I certainly do agree with like all of your lore-based points, though. I definitely can appreciate a setup of a good story, a setup of important moments, and you're right. This movie does a lot of that.
Mm-hmm. All right, yeah. I wanted to make that case because I know Sean in particular, and also a couple of my friends, they think that this movie is just another Avengers movie where nothing really happens, and I think it's the exact opposite. I think without this movie, you literally do not have Infinity War and Endgame feeling it. Because if they were just together the whole time, there'd be no conflict. If they were just together fighting against Thanos, it would just feel like another Avengers movie. The fact that they're divided in Infinity War, and the fact that Cap and Tony literally do not speak throughout that entire film, makes it that much more desperate, and makes it that much more like sad when they fail, because you're like, crap, like they lost. Imagine what they could have done if they were together instead of separated. So that's my argument.
Right.
I won't talk as much for the next one because I just talked a lot. Holy crap.
No, you're fine. The next up film on our list, carrying on from the fantastic start of Civil War, taking a complete break from our main cast of characters, we're introduced to Doctor Strange in Doctor Strange. And I think that Doctor Strange was the perfect follow-up act. It showed you that, okay, you've been dealing with a universe of super soldiers and trained assassins and people who use tech and people who have these godlike powers. Then we got the weird side with Doctor Strange. We had the Sorcerer Supreme. We had the Master. We had the Ancient One. We had everything show up here that you didn't expect. And I think it was such a wonderful, weird departure from the Seidu like mythicalness of individuals using power given to them, or the one god that you have at disposal. This showed that magic runs much deeper in the MCU, and it also firsthand shows someone directly using an Infinity Stone, not really by accident, more so like, I know what this is, I'm going to train with it, I understand its full ramifications, and I'm going to use it in the way it was intended, to change the nature of the world around me. It showed just how powerful magic could be, how powerful the Infinity Stones could be, and it created this, I think one of the most well-developed characters in the short time we had him in Doctor Strange.
Caroline?
I agree. I really love Doctor Strange. It's actually probably one of my like top 5 Marvel movies. I adore this movie. I think it's so different from every other Marvel movie out there that I just was blown away by it. I don't know. I think it's coming from like the start where he gives off kind of Tony Stark vibes in the beginning, where he's just kind of like a selfish rich guy, and then completely does a 180, changes his entire morals and the way his thought process works while still keeping that same like energy level, I guess. I'm trying to think of a good way to put it. But I really did love this movie, and I remember the first time watching it, I had no interest in seeing it when it first came out. I was just like, I'm not really interested in this, and then I think it really blew me away.
Yeah. I love a good disagreement. I don't hate this movie, but I will say I love the character of Doctor Strange. I think he's one of the best parts of Infinity War. I can't wait to see what they do with him in the future. And in this movie, he's really entertaining. I wasn't the biggest fan of this movie. I thought it was a good origin story, but I'm happy y'all liked it. I thought it was good. I like all MCU movies. I just like some more than others. And this is definitely toward like the middle of the pack for me. I thought the visuals in this movie are just incredible. I think it's easily the biggest strength of the movie is all the visual effects they're able to pull off and make his magical powers and the Sorcerer Supreme powers make it feel like something we've never even seen before. But it came across as an atypical origin story. The villain was very weak. I think his name's like Caecilius or something. They made a character played by Mads Mikkelsen not very interesting, and I think that's a crime because Mads Mikkelsen is a fantastic actor. I love Benedict Cumberbatch as the character, but I just thought kind of the supporting cast wasn't too great around him outside of Wong, and I'm happy that they brought him back in future movies. But overall, I thought it was a good movie. I totally get why people like it, though, because it does have some really great stuff to it. It just didn't quite hit me on the same level, but that's just me. I do think it was a great place to put this movie. I agree with Sean's point in the sense that right after Civil War, it's good to introduce a brand new character because characters that we already knew, and I thought they placed it at a great spot. But you know, it could have been better for me. But I'm happy. But I see why people like it. I just didn't get all the hype around it. But yeah, that's my opinion. Take it or leave it.
I can understand that. The villain in Doctor Strange is definitely very forgettable. I think where my love for it grows is just I really love his origin story. And it's just a different type of hero. His motives are very different than any other person that we've seen. And I can only appreciate that type of origin story. And I'm interested to see what they do with him in Doctor Strange 2.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
I can only expect the world of it, and I really hope they do not disappoint.
I certainly agree with that. I certainly agree. When I watched Strange the first time, I instantly fell in love with Stephen Strange. I do completely agree that Caecilius and even Dormammu are kind of forgettable. What I enjoyed the most out of this film was Strange's journey, and I completely agree with you, Caroline. I like the change. Everyone else in the MCU either was thrown onto the villain side and then is getting redeemed, or they were just a good person chosen to be a hero, or destiny had their way with them. Strange didn't. Strange, yes, had an unfortunate accident where he was paralyzed, but he didn't he wasn't like, this is destiny. It wasn't just him stumbling into meeting the Ancient One. It was very much, he met the Ancient One, and she offered him one direction. And then while he was there, he saw the forces of darkness and Caecilius, and knew, okay, there's bad people out there who do the same, and that's a path presented for him. And everyone's trying to compare him all the time to Caecilius. Like, Wong does it so many times throughout the early parts of the movie. They're like, oh, he's going to become another one. Like, so he keeps hearing, like, plan A, plan B, either be the Ancient One or be Caecilius. And he just says, I'm going to do my own thing. He chooses not to be a hero per se. He chooses to just be the smartest man in the room. And then realize that by doing that, he's kind of now able to he's able to hold the forces of darkness at bay, not because he thinks they're bad and need to be destroyed, but he realizes that there's a balance to things. And that's why I think it's really appropriate that he uses the Time Stone as his main instrument of magic until Infinity War Endgame. It is a perfect representation of him learning what balance is, of what you can do and what you should do at different times. Strange isn't a hero. Strange is a sage, and I think that the MCU needed a sage-like character this far into it, given what was on the horizon.
Yeah. Good points all around. I think that was a great argument. I will say, though, even though I'm not a biggest fan of this movie, I totally agree with the whole thing about how he is a great character, because he is. I think Doctor Strange, he's a person that my immediate thought after this movie was not, wow, what a great movie. It was, wow, what a great character. And I can't wait to see what they do with him next. I thought the movie did him enough service to set him up for future things, but I didn't think it did enough in the film itself. But I left the movie saying, wow, I can't wait to see what they do with him next. And they delivered, because I thought that he was one of the best parts of Infinity War, but we'll get to that. Moving on, I guess, unless anyone else has anything to say.
I believe that's all.
All right, I take by the silence that we're good. So after this, we got probably the most anticipated sequel in Marvel history, other than Iron Man 2, and that's Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2. The first Guardians of the Galaxy was the definition, I think, of lightning in a bottle. It was characters that no one knew anything about outside of hardcore comic nerds, and the world fell in love with these 5 misfits crossing planets and doing mischievous things, not quite getting along, and they decided, hey, we made a lot of money with this, we should make a sequel and make even more. And I think that this sequel was not what everyone was expecting. It delved a lot deeper into the characters than it did worrying about making jokes or having them go on some crazy adventure. And I think I really appreciated that in the long run, because this movie really goes deep into particularly Star-Lord and also the relationship between Gamora and Nebula. And I really appreciated what the movie did with that, because in the first movie, they're kind of just, you get their backstory kind of in that police lineup scene where they're like, oh, this is Star-Lord, he did this. Oh, this is Rocket, he did this. But you start to actually figure out why these characters are who they are and why they act the way they do. And it was really, really great. And I think I like the first one still more, but this one was definitely a solid sequel that added more lore to the world, did things that I wasn't expecting, but I still enjoyed. And again, these performances by the actors and the comic lines, and obviously Baby Groot, it was a genius move, because Baby Groot just sells toys just when you look at him. So yeah, I enjoyed Guardians 2, not as much as the first. I know a lot of people love this movie, and I also know a lot of people that hate this movie. So I'm interested to see what y'all think, but I thought it was a good movie.
This movie, I think there was part of me that was very annoyed with Rocket through a good portion of the movie, and not in the good way. I wasn't oh, ha ha ha, how annoying. I was just this is just stupid. We gotta get past this. Besides that, I don't think this fell short of striking the same chord with fans and having just comedy, but also the depth that they achieved with it. It was still felt like a comedy, but at the same time, it was topics that I think people could relate to, which is hard to find in a superhero movie sometimes. And it felt very humbled as a movie. Like I felt like I could relate to some of the situations that these people were in. It hit a chord with me that I wasn't expecting it to, and I think they did a really good job with it.
I completely agree. This was, like, I said this about the first Guardians. It was a film made with heart. It was a film that every scene was dripping in passion. And this movie did that again. They somehow were able to ride the wave of taking these badass space adventurers and making them into characters with thoughts, motivations, beliefs, and trauma that they had to accept within themselves. And they did it again. They went even deeper. Learning things about these characters in this movie felt visceral, but in a good way, like we did in Guardians. I forever think that I will forever feel that one of my favorite scenes out of most of the movies in Phase 3 is from this movie. It's when Mantis tries to read Drax's mind. And she just immediately recoils in pain. Like, you're angry and upset, and you hurt so deeply, yet you remain so calm. And he, in a moment of wisdom that you don't see normally from Drax, explains that he always has to feel like that. It's what moves him forward to see it never happen again to anyone else. That moment is so unexpected, because you expect almost Mantis to hear like elevator music or something, but she gets the complete opposite. She gets as close to Drax as anyone has gotten in the entirety of the film. You also get these wonderful moments with Quill coming to terms of who he is and realizing what the monster that Ego represents was. The love that Yondu realizes he had for Quill is incredibly moving. There's so much in this movie that just rips your heart out in the most like feel-good way. And I think that, like, if you want a feel-good movie, if you want a movie that actually shows you like what the most beautiful corners of the MCU can be, it's this one. Ironically, it's the one with the space vigilantes that gives you the most heart through and through.
Yeah, it just reminded me. Yondu is a huge standout in this movie. I love Yondu. In the first movie, he's just like a fun guy who's combating with the Guardians and trying to get something that they are, and like, oh, there's like some feuding or whatever. But in this movie, he is front and center, a main character, and the scene where he sacrifices himself, where he puts the oxygen mask on Quill instead of himself, and the funeral that they throw for him with the song "Father and Son" by Cat Stevens playing, so good. Like what a great scene, and what a great send-off for a character that we didn't even know that we needed. Because after the first movie, we were like, oh yeah, Yondu. He's just like, he's just there. But this movie really, really made Yondu a great character. And I loved his ending. And yeah, I think you hit it. I think you hit the nail right on the head. I think we all, for the first time, we all agree on a movie so far of these three. Guardians 2.
I also just want to say the one thing before we move on. I am still waiting for the payoff from the birthing pod scene at the end of the movie.
The Adam Warlock one?
That, yeah. I've said it before, like, I would have wanted the Warlock movie to be in the previous phase, and then when I remember seeing this, because, like, I, like, knowing, like, probably what was going to be ahead, like, seeing all, the Infinity Stones, and like, okay, the Infinity War is on the horizon, and then I saw that for the first time when I saw the movie, and I was like, there's no way they're going to have that ready by Infinity War. And I was right, sadly. But I'm waiting for Warlock. I want it to happen so badly.
I think
like
it's going to be in 3.
They acknowledged
really
me. And then they've just not said anything. They validated me. That's literally what it was. Like, I was cheering for like a week after I saw this movie. But yeah, I just wanted to point that out.
Alrighty. So that came out in May of 2017. Fun fact, by the way, that was the first weekend that I worked at my movie theater. It was the first weekend that I started working was the weekend that Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2 came out. It was May 2nd, 2017, I think. That was when I started my job. So, fun little fact if you're wondering. That was the first big movie that came out during my employment at AMC. So, there you go. Later on in that summer, though, we got our third incarnation on the big screen in terms of a different actor playing him, and that was Tom Holland's introduction to the character and the MCU's introduction to the character in terms of giving him his own solo film, and that was Spider-Man: Homecoming. What a fitting title, Homecoming, coming back to Marvel. Yeah, Spider-Man: Homecoming came out, and I think I said it already in this episode. I think Tom Holland is the best Spider-Man actor we've ever seen. I think Tobey Maguire was really, really good, and it was going to be hard to top him because he was so iconic as that character. And Andrew Garfield, I did not like at all, so it wasn't easy to beat him for me. But I thought that Tom Holland captures the innocence of Peter Parker so well, and he portrays not only Peter, but Spider-Man, and the duality between those two perfectly. And I love how this movie did not do what the first two did, because you had Spider-Man 2002 told his origin story. You had Amazing Spider-Man 2020 in 2012 tell his origin story. They felt like carbon copies. I'm like, I want something new. But Marvel made Spider-Man into a Ferris Bueller, John Hughes movie, and I love it. I thought that was such a cool idea because making like a high school movie about Spider-Man, it's a big risk, but I thought they handled it really well. And by far, one of the best parts of this movie is Vulture, Michael Keaton. Oh man, he killed it in this movie, and the whole twist at the end with Vulture being Liz's dad, that was a huge moment in the theater where everyone was just like, like, oh my god, what? It truly shocked me. The only downside for this movie and what knocks it down a couple pegs is I don't think this movie has that many memorable action scenes. I thought that the action was well directed and well choreographed, but it didn't really do anything to stretch the boundaries, and it didn't really have any memorable moments. It had nothing along the lines of like the train scene in Spider-Man 2, or it didn't have anything along the lines of what it had in Far From Home. But in this movie, they really tried to focus on the character of Peter Parker, and I did a great good. I'm happy that they didn't make it a buddy cop movie with him and Iron Man, because Iron Man's in the movie, but he's not in it so that it's like he's also there throughout the whole thing. He shows up sparingly, and I liked that. I was happy they made it a Spider-Man movie and not a Spider-Man and Iron Man movie. And yeah, I really, really dug this movie. I thought it was great. On Caroline, anyone?
I'll shoot. I agree with you. This was not the action-packed Spider-Man movie people thought it was going to be. But it didn't need to be that. This was a movie that was focused on character over action. It was focused on emotion over desire. It was focused on proving a statement versus giving you like a fantasy with a moral to it, or setting up the next movie after it. This didn't care about the movies that came before it, mostly, and it didn't care about the movies that came after it. It said, we're going to take a step away from the galaxy-saving, universe-ending forces that we've seen, and we're going to give you the friendly neighborhood Spider-Man. That's it. If you think about it, this is the first time we've just seen the antagonist be a low-level, low-power-level criminal in a long time.
Yep.
He's not some world-ending threat. He's just a guy who sells really rare weapons. At the end of the day, that was a perfect first adversary for Peter Parker, the friendly neighborhood Spider-Man. And it was also great because you see Iron Man, who is not a character in this movie because Iron Man needs to be there. He's a character in the movie that is subbing in for Uncle Ben. And that is what he needed to do. He's not Iron Man here. He's Tony Stark, and he's Uncle Ben. The whole point is to be a father figure and teach Spider-Man what it is to be Spider-Man and what it also means to be Peter Parker. This was not, and if this is probably the first non-Avengers movie that we've had since Phase 1, since a long time. This is not an Avengers movie. This is a power comes with responsibilities movie that is set in the Avengers universe. It's set in the Marvel Cinematic Universe. It's a breath of fresh air.
Yeah, and it tells it through a completely different lens because it tells you what it's like to actually just be a normal kid in the MCU, because you see all of Spider-Man's friends, and of course they're like geeking out about Captain America and Thor and all of them, and like of course they each have their own crushes on each other. Like it feels so real. And also this movie does not get enough credit for how funny it is. It is hysterical.
Oh, it is
like
horribly funny.
The character of Ned is, oh my god, the character of Ned is great. The science teacher that they have, who eventually then leads them on the tour in Far From Home, is great. The character of Flash Thompson, I loved what they did with Flash in this movie. They made him a nerd, but they made him a nerd that bullies Peter Parker. He's not just like this jock. Like they took risks. They didn't want to do the same stuff, and I loved that. And I've heard many complaints about this movie about how like, oh well, Spider-Man just has an Iron Man suit, so he's just Iron Man. No, he's not. Calm yourself down. Again, take risks. They can't just make the same Spider-Man movie again. So yeah, give him a higher tech suit. I liked the move. I thought it was really cool, and this movie is hysterical. It does not get enough credit for how funny it is.
I agree.
And Caroline, correct me if I'm wrong, but you have not seen this movie,
I am ashamed to admit I have not seen the Spider-Man movies. I have seen the Tobey Maguire and Andrew Garfield ones, but these were not on Disney Plus. So, and in 2017, I was in college, so I did not go to the movie theaters at all. It's a shame. I really do need to watch them, but I have to agree, from the little bit I have seen of Tom Holland, he is, I think, the best Spider-Man. I think he pulls it off the best. I've gotten a lot of arguments with people, especially since I haven't even seen the movies. But I really do think he portrays a teenage boy the best, mainly because he was one when he shot the movies. Don't you love man play a 16-year-old boy? It doesn't make sense.
Don't you love it when high schoolers just constantly look like they're 30 years old in the old Spider-Man movies? Right? They all just look like they're adults. Oh my god. No, I totally agree. I think Tom Holland, he won me over. He gave us a little appetizer in Civil War, and it's like, wow, this kid is bringing it, and I cannot wait. And then in this movie, he's just like, you know what? I'm just gonna end the argument right now. I'm just gonna absolutely kill it as this character, and no one's gonna. When I think of Spider-Man, I no longer think of Tobey Maguire. I now think of Tom Holland as Spider-Man. That's the biggest praise I can give him. I think that he has redefined the character for many people, myself included.
Agreed. Absolutely agreed.
And now we get to a movie that I frackin' love. Thor Ragnarok. What a film. Talk about, okay, what Captain America the Winter Soldier did for Cap, this movie did that same thing for Thor. It made Thor so much more likable and so much more accessible, and everyone just immediately loved him 10 times more than they already did. Because what do you have to do with Thor to make him likable? Apparently, you have to make him not Thor, but in a way that still makes him feel like Thor. It's weird. Oh, his hammer? Gone. His masculine, godlike, play it as a joke the whole movie. And they did things that the first two Thor movies just didn't quite understand. Like, they needed to embrace the weirdness of this character and his world. And this is one of those movies where it's, first of all, it's wildly funny. I personally think this movie is funnier, and it's just, I'm not sure which one is funnier. It's up there with the first Guardians. I don't know which one is funnier, but this movie makes me laugh so much. And I try to think about what character is the funniest, and I can never decide because every character steals the film. The Hulk, hysterical. Jeff Goldblum as the Grand Master, borderline perfection. Korg, oh my god, Korg, he's just the best. And then you also got Valkyrie, you got Loki's in the movie. Like, there's just so many incredible characters, and it's just such a fun ride. And sometimes I hear talked about, like, oh, the movie was so much fun. It's like, yeah, but what about the rest of it? Like, this is actually one of those movies that really fits the billing because this is just a fun movie that I just freaking love. It's so good. I could gush about it all day. I really
This is
could.
my favorite Marvel movie. I love this movie
Yes.
so much. I was it really does. It does such a good job with being absolutely hysterical, but in a different way that Guardians of the Galaxy was, because it wasn't a comedy.
Yes.
It didn't feel like a
No.
comedy, and I liked that. I liked that better, and I think I appreciate that type of comedy more because it is so much more difficult to achieve. So I think it's funnier than Guardians of the Galaxy for that reason, because Guardians of the Galaxy was they threw out cheap jokes, and they were good cheap jokes. I loved them. But this one, it was intelligent humor, and I loved it. And then it's still emotional. It still hits that emotional chord with the end, with just Asgard being gone, and it's just like that felt like one of his personality traits, and they took it away from him. But with the same thing as like Asgard is wherever the people are, and I think that it's just so poetically beautiful, and it's just this movie. It's like one of those things, like I'll put it on before I go to bed, like all the time.
I
It's my
can
favorite.
watch
Love it.
Korg highlights all day because Korg cracks me up. That's that line where he's like, I'm made of rocks, but don't let that intimidate you. You don't need to be afraid unless you're made of scissors. Like it's just perfect. Jeff Goldblum, even though he's basically just being Jeff Goldblum, I don't care. I'll watch him go like it. I don't care. Jeff Goldblum's perfect, and yeah, I totally agree because everyone's just like, oh, it's just like Guardians. It's a different kind of humor, and I'm so happy you said that because this feels like an improv comedy. Because Taika Waititi, the director, has said that a lot of this movie was improvised, and it feels so like loose and so like free, and I love that feel that the movie gives off. Sean, I know you haven't said much, so I'll let you speak now. But Thor Ragnarok, good movie, good movie. Oh, so good.
I mean, there's not much left to say. It's you guys certainly have covered everything that certainly needs to be said in this. I think that just like the one creative thing like that hasn't really been highlighted is the sheer like left turn that the movie takes after the Bifrost scene where Hela comes and completely frightens Loki and Thor. Like you would think like, oh, them getting thrown off the Bifrost, they're dead, or they're like in some low part of the mythical realms. No, they're just like, we're gonna dump you into sci-fi land, and you're gonna fight in a gladiatorial arena on a space in a space gladiator fight, and you have to work backward from there to get back to Asgard. Like that's the left turn you get from that scene, like that, like oh, like the scene with the Grand Master and meeting Hulk again. It's such a weird left turn that works way too well, and it's what makes the movie, I think. Also, I just really like I know it's been touched on, like the whole like you're the god of lightning, not the god of hammers. I do really, really love the scene where Thor sees the vision of his dad telling him that. That's just so neat. Like it's one of my favorite parts of this movie.
Also, the Doctor Strange cameo is a good one when
That is my
Loki's
favorite
like, I've been
bit.
falling for 30 minutes.
That is my favorite bit of the entire movie.
Okay.
The movie's great, but like my favorite sequence
Wow.
is the entirety of when Doctor Strange is on the screen. It is so good. It is so funny, and it also shows that behind the scenes, while the other movies have been going on, that Strange is now wickedly confident with his magic. Like you can
And I
see
think-
that he has earned the title
yeah.
of Sorcerer Supreme. He's continued to study. He's been diligent, and the power and effortless control he has over his magic is displayed in full here.
Yeah, and I think that this is the best that Hulk has been since the Avengers. I think that Hulk is so good in this movie because they finally made him talk, and he's hysterical. And also the scenes with Mark Ruffalo as Bruce Banner are also really great with his chemistry with Thor. And there's also a callback to Ultron when what gets him to snap back into Banner is by watching the video of Natasha, the message that she sent him when he was flying away on the Quinjet, and that's what triggers him to snap back. And I actually have that reminded me when we get to Endgame, I want to talk about, because I teased it on the last episode, I want to talk about my Black Widow theory that I had, but it didn't come true. But I want to talk about it. But that just reminded me. But yeah, Thor Ragnarok, so good, such a great movie.
So
Can't sing enough praises about it.
I will say that we certainly have to pick up the pace. I'm looking at the timestamps as we were recording, and we still got half a universe to get through.
Or can you not
Sister's being a trooper. Just
Or the cats for the cat.
tell? Sounds good. All right, so next up, we'll try to speed up the pace, but next up we have the first ever comic book movie to be nominated for Best Picture at the Academy Awards. Deservedly so, that's up to us to decide, but that movie that we're referring to is Black Panther. And this movie was, to say that it was a cultural phenomenon, I think is an understatement. This movie took over the planet. It was everywhere, and it is one of the highest grossing movies domestically, just in the US. I think it set a record or something. And I think that this movie is probably one of the, if not the most mature of all of Marvel's movies, even though there are rhinoceroses running around in war. I think that this movie does a really great job of really developing a great setting. That's probably my biggest praise for the movie is Wakanda feels so real and so well made and produced, and I loved a lot of the characters in it. I do think it's a bit overrated because everyone was saying that it was, yeah, again, it was nominated for Best Freaking Picture. Like everyone loved the movie, and as I do see that, I do think it was a bit overhyped. I do still enjoy it. Obviously, the late Chadwick Boseman gave a fantastic performance. Michael B. Jordan as Killmonger, one of the best villains we've ever seen. The supporting cast obviously is great. I really did enjoy the movie. However, I do think that as much as everyone else enjoyed it, I don't quite reach that level. But I do still appreciate this movie, and I think that it did a great job of expanding on his character outside of the brief introduction we had to him in Civil War. I think it was a great solo movie for him. It's a shame we won't get a second one because of Chadwick Boseman's unfortunate passing, but for the movie that we have him for, I think it was a great addition to the franchise.
like this movie. I'm saying it with every single one. I love all of Phase 3, realistically. But I think there's a point, and like when you look at the movie and like why it should be nominated. You said it for Best Picture, right?
Yes.
Yeah, it was not for Best Picture.
I think it's like you can't just look at what the movie was, but the cultural impact that it made on people, not just in our country, but in other countries. This was such a huge movie release. And I had close friends that were just so, like, they had never seen a Marvel movie in their life, and this was the first one that they had seen because of the culture that is in that movie that we haven't seen in other Marvel movies. I love the detail that they put in between mixing in like more like ancient, I don't know if ancient's the correct word, but more really, they had a really good balance between that. And I really love the entire thing. I loved the villain. I was very memorable. I couldn't say enough good things about this movie. I don't know. I really liked it. And I think the cultural impact it had on our society was just amazing. And it was amazing to see my friends get into the universe because of this movie.
I certainly think that this movie like lives up to its name. I think that it did a wonderful job with the story and the characters. The culture in this was beautiful. I think this is one of the most aesthetically beautiful MCU movies. Everything is vibrant. Every environment feels grounded and real. I think that for me personally, I do like this movie. I do, but I think that part of what I thought when I was watching it and seeing it was, this is a great story, this is a great world, but I kind of felt a little bit distracted with the world. Like, my brain kept gravitating to admiring the scenery and then realized I missed a line of dialogue. Or I was like so enamored with the wide shots of the battle at the end that when we switched back to the train fight, I almost wanted to go back to the big open field. I think that they did a wonderful job with making this film look beautiful, but they didn't make every part of the film worth the short attention span that I possess. to fully grasp it. And this was one of the few MCU movies that I had to rewatch a few times to get everything. I didn't just scoop every detail on the first go. That was my big problem with it. So I felt like this felt like one of the only Marvel movies that I had to actually study to fully grasp what it did for the universe. I was thoroughly impressed, and I still love this movie, but it definitely felt like one of the ones that I was not able to grasp as easy as others because of the quality and balance of everything being slightly shifted for me.
Yeah, I mean, it won it won 3 Oscars. It won for Best Original Score. That's another thing the movie did really well. I think the music is fantastic. It won for Production Design, which it also deserved. And it won for Costumes, which I think it also deserved. I think that all 3 of those wins were justified. Again, the world of Wakanda is my biggest praise for the film. I think it did such a cool job of introducing this place that we've never seen before. And it was a great lead-in to our very next movie, Infinity War, because of the fact that Wakanda is such an integral part of that movie. It really did a great job of making us care about Wakanda. So that way, when we get to Infinity War and the big fight goes on, we already know these characters, we know this world, and we feel that much more invested. And again, as both of you rang home, the cultural impact of this movie cannot be understated. I think it is probably the most culturally resonant of every MCU movie because of just how big this movie was when it came out. It was just everywhere. It was everywhere, and it had an album of all original music made by like Kendrick Lamar and all those guys. All the trailers were like insanely popular, and then the movie was just a huge box office smash. Yeah, I think it was great. And it came out during Black History Month, which I thought was also a really nice touch. It came out in February, which was really, really cool. So, yeah, Black Panther. Love it. And now, the big boy. Big Daddy Thanos. In Infinity War. Caroline, I'm going to start with you because I'm seeing your face right now. I'm really interested to see what you have to say about Avengers Infinity War, which came out, by the way, April 27th, 2018. And at that time, held the record for the largest opening weekend in box office history.
So, I haven't seen this movie in a while. Actually, probably since it first came out. I did like this movie. I think there are some flaws in this movie. What I think is interesting is as I care a lot more about the characters after like WandaVision. I didn't care that much about Vision when he died in Infinity War. I just didn't. So I think it'd be interesting to rewatch it now, having some level of care towards them. With that being said, I did like how it ended. You don't see that in a lot of movies where they just lost, and that's it. And then they made us wait, and then that was it. We just kind of sat there and we were like, "Oh my goodness, everyone is dead. Everyone I love is dead." It was like that book that they have for kids with the dinosaur on the front that all my friends are dead. That's how I felt. Yeah. I don't know. I have some issues with the movie. You guys talk about it though for a second.
Sean, you can go. Sean, you can go first. Go ahead.
Every second of this film fills me with anxiety, but in a good way. Like, it's so, like, okay, we knew that we were going to see everyone, so it's not really surprising when people get put on the screen for the first time. It's neat how they get put on the screen, in the order they get put on the screen. Like, I would have never pictured that the first team up that you actually see is Wong, Strange, Banner, and Iron Man. And I was like, huh. Yeah. That's not the first draft pick I thought I was going to see immediately. And the chemistry that fits between that team alone was so unique and so funny. And then, of course, you have Peter Parker immediately thrown in there. Then you switch and you get the almost like cloak and dagger scene with Wanda and Vision and Cap, and that whole that sequence is great. Then we're back to space, and then we're back on Earth, and then we're all over the place in this wonderfully quirky order of attendance. But at the same time, it's like really neat to see how they decided to team everyone up. But the anxiety and the threat is just scary because it's not like you're seeing this terrifying villain monologuing. It's not like you're like, oh, we detected a disturbance and like this villain's doing this. We have to go, Avengers. No, it's just all of a sudden, out of nowhere, with no prep, the army's here. We're all doomed. It's frightening because it doesn't take the formula of a superhero and supervillain. It's not, we know that the villain is up to something, or, oh, we know this is going to happen. It's just, surprise! I'm here to kill everyone you love. And it's scary. And you're freaked out the entire time. And you know that it's going to be a rough ride when Loki dies that quick into this film.
Yep.
Like, you know, like, that's the moment that everyone else in the theater just kind of sat there and said, oh no, we're going to be crying by the end of this. And that was such a unique experience to see in the theaters when this came out. I didn't see it opening night. I will always regret that I never saw it opening night, but I saw it like 4 days later with a crew that like had not seen it previously. Like, I was in a theater of like probably 90% of people who had not seen it yet. And that was still unique. Like, you could hear gasps in the audience. That was so cool. And what I think I love about this movie so much is not only does everyone get to show off the full extent of their abilities and powers, I love how they lose. Like, I love the loss. It feels heartbreaking. You feel like you've been punched in the chest. It's so good. And what the best part about this is they stay true to the Mad Titan's character. They stay true to Thanos as like, I'm not a villain. I don't think I'm a villain. I'm just here to stop the universe from eating itself, so I will do the culling for it, so it's painless. He's not gloating at the end of this film. He's not angry at the end of this film. He's not sitting in an opulent palace thinking he's ruler of the universe. What do we get? We get a very soft, like somber score of music. He gets up out of his chair. He goes and sits on his porch in his hut that he made of sticks and wood. He looks over his simple farm. There's nothing gloryful here. There's just a farm, him relaxing, and he just smiles at the sunrise. And then you get...
And a Picardy third.
The Picardy third at the end. The Picardy third at the end was... Oh, the Picardy third at the end. But, like, it's just... It's heartbreaking. Because you know that you didn't just see a villain win, but you saw heroes lose. And I didn't think they were going to really go that far with it. I thought we were going to, I thought the final scene of the movie was going to be something along the lines of, like, alright, Thanos did it. Thanos is off gloating somewhere. But it's going to be a heroic and hopeful shot of the survivors getting ready to go out and go for round 2. No, it's not. Everyone's upset. Everyone's dead. Thanos isn't gloating. And I feel upset. Like, I feel upset because, like, it was too real. It was too heartbreaking. And that feeling alone gets me excited every time this movie is brought up.
Yeah. So I have a lot to say. Sorry, I'm gonna go off on a bit of a thing here. So this movie has a lot of problems. First off, this movie Alien 3's the beginning in the sense that it takes the ending of Thor Ragnarok and completely retcons it and kills off every Asgard. It's like Asgard is not a place, Asgard's a people, and then all the people are dead. So it doesn't really matter. Also, Hulk is not in this movie, really at all. And I was very disappointed in that, because Hulk is one of my favorite characters. Also, this movie kind of does feel a bit uneven. It has a lot of different things that kind of feel disjointed, and it's kind of going from place to place. With all that said, this is the best MCU movie. By far. It is my favorite. And it has a lot to do with one person. And we haven't really talked about this person really in depth. Sean got a hint of it, but I'm going to go full out. The best part of this movie, and the reason why this movie works, is Thanos. Because Thanos is the best character, the best villain character, arguably in comic book movie history. The only one that I think you can confidently say is better is the Joker. Thanos is the best villain, and because he's a villain that you understand. The worst comic book villains are the villains that are just evil people who want money or want power or want the world to end. People like Malekith from Thor 2, or people like Caecilius from Doctor Strange, or people like Ronan from Guardians of the Galaxy. Like, oh, they're not villains, they're obstacles. This guy's a villain. He's an antagonist. He's the person who's trying to do something that the heroes want to stop. And you understand why. Because basically, this is Thanos' movie. If you really think about it, this movie is about a guy who wants to do something so badly he believes it is his life's purpose, and he'll do anything and everything, including sacrificing his own daughter, to do it. And the Avengers are almost like this ragtag militia that's trying to stop him. That's pretty much this movie. Because Endgame is the Avengers movie. Infinity War is Thanos' movie. And I was worried that with the minimal time we got with Thanos up until this movie, because all we really had gotten with him was a couple post-credit scenes and like maybe some blurbs here or there, I was really worried that they were going to miss the mark with this character. But oh my goodness, they knocked it out of the park. And Josh Brolin does not get enough credit for how good he is as this character. Because I know a lot of it's motion capture, and that means that everyone immediately dismisses it as a performance. But this is a performance by Josh Brolin, and he killed it. I thought he was fantastic. Also, the Avengers, and thank you, Josh Brolin played Thanos brilliantly. And I have no shame in saying this. This might be a controversial statement, but I think Infinity War is the Empire Strikes Back of this generation. It is the movie that ends in a similar way, leaves people sad, depressed, wanting more, doesn't feel like that much of a completed film. It almost feels like you're very unsatisfied, yet you are satisfied, and then it's over. And it has that same feeling of just desperation and hope, and it's like the heroes have nowhere to go, and the villains are just constantly winning and just beating down on you, and it feels like there's nothing to live for. And then they lose. It's almost a hopeless film. Similarly to Empire, I believe that this movie is that movie for this generation. I remember sitting in the theater hearing people crying, people so sad that they're literally watching Spider's life in Tony's arms, that Doctor Strange and Black Panther and Wanda and Falcon are just gone. And it's like, it is the ending of the movie that I wanted, but I never thought would actually happen, because I didn't think Disney had the courage to go that route. I knew there'd be a part 2, because they already said that there's going to be a part 2 to this, but I really didn't. For something deep down within me was just like, I feel like Thanos is going to win, but like they're not going to kill people. I don't think they're going to. No, they killed half of everybody, and there's no hope by the end of the movie. And the last line of the movie is Captain America saying, "Oh God," and then Thanos is smiling and the movie's over. And it's just like, oh my goodness, there's nothing happy about the ending of this movie, and yet it is my favorite, because this movie is constantly riveting. There's never any time to breathe, and I love that. This is a 2.5-hour movie that feels like 90 minutes, because as soon as you start watching it, you can't take your eyes off of it. Everything that's happening on the screen matters. This movie has no time to breathe. It has no time to, let the characters, sit around a campfire and talk about their backstory. No, this is a movie about desperation and hope, and the movie moves at that breakneck pace. And Thanos is the best villain in the MCU. It's not even close. He makes Loki look like a C villain, and I love Loki. But I think it's symbolic that he snaps his neck in the beginning. He's like, no, I'm the best villain now. Bye. And it's just... And also, Thor is also fantastic in this movie, and the scene where he shows up on Wakanda is arguably the biggest hand clap woo in the theater moment before we got to Endgame, obviously, because obviously there's some parts in that movie that top that. But man, Infinity War did everything I wanted it to do. And I know some people don't like the movie because they feel maybe it's too busy. I disagree wholeheartedly. I think that this movie is borderline one of the best comic book movies ever made, not just MCU. I think it's up there with some of the best. So that's my spiel. Infinity War for the win.
So my issues with this movie, I actually wholeheartedly agree with you. I think this is an amazing movie. I think it is bone chilling, and it is just like it's gut wrenching. Like, it is truly horrific, and I loved every minute of it, and also hated it. My biggest issue with the movie is I don't know if it's necessarily with Infinity War, but it's with the worst placed movie in the Marvel universe, which is Captain Marvel. I am so angry about how
Your whole
Just-
your whole statement is I hate this movie because the movie that comes after it.
Well, no, I don't hate the movie. Don't give me.
Well, no.
It's. What? She should have been there. She should have been there. That movie should have come before it. It really should have. And then to give us a half-assed reason as to why she wasn't, and just be like, oh, I was doing other things or other worlds that need saving. I hated that. I was so mad, and I wasn't mad obviously until Captain Marvel came out. And I was like, hold on, this is someone that could have helped us the entire time. And I think they needed to lose. Don't get me wrong. I love that they lost in Infinity War. But she should have been there. She should have been there.
Yeah.
And it makes me angry.
Right.
And like that's not... I don't blame Infinity War. I'm blaming the placement of the movies, more or less. It's just... And it feels like the reason they gave us was just so... just not... It wasn't good enough. That wasn't a good enough reason. This was the biggest fight for you to be at. What other universe? I would love to see the fight at the other universe that was more important than this one.
Agreed.
Because I'm just not convinced. I'm just not.
Yeah.
And I like Captain Marvel. But that it enraged me. I was so angry about that. It just didn't feel. I don't know. It felt sloppy.
I completely agree with you. Captain Marvel, and I guess like we can kind of use this as like, well, actually no, we can't because Ant-Man came out. Damn, like, because Ant-Man came between it. I will say this before we attempt to get to the part where we can actually start screaming about Captain Marvel. I completely agree with you. I think that the post-credit scene was neat. Like all of us comic book nerds in the audience were like, "Is that Captain Marvel's symbol?" And we were like freaking out because like, oh, like that's like on the list of people that could have beat Thanos. And then we all collectively looked at each other and said, wait a minute, why wasn't she there in the first place? Like it's like you turned in your test, and then as you turned in your test, you noticed that the teacher has the answer key sitting like on a side table, and you could have been looking there the entire time. Like, that's what that post-credit scene felt like. That's what knowing that Marvel was right around the corner felt like. I was like, wait a minute. We didn't need to have this loss if she was there. I mean, who knows? Maybe they still would have lost. They should have still lost. I agree with that. I knew, watching the movie and seeing the multiple people get absolutely bodied by Thanos, I was like, yep, me, who has read the Infinity Comics multiple times, I'm like, yep, that person's dead. We're gonna see that person get defeated. They're not gonna survive. I'm the only person in the theater out of the group of the people that I went to go see it with that knew we're gonna see some deaths here. Like, there's no way they're gonna avoid it. But it was just like when they actually showed that they were following the continuity and they're gonna bring Marvel in for the second half, it felt cheap. It felt really cheap.
Yeah.
That is the one complaint.
Two things
that I
before
really
we move
have.
on, because I do want to move on. Yeah, two things before we move on, because I do want to move on. One, I want to commend the score for this movie, because Alan Silvestri came back to score this movie, and he did a brilliant job. And the other thing is something that wasn't even part of the movie. It's something that on the drive home from the movie, I had a revelation that then made the movie so much better. And that is, I went in my head and I was like, okay, wait, who died? Okay, so Spider-Man died, Doctor Strange, Black Panther, Wanda, Falcon. And as I was listing these names and I tried to figure out who was left, I was like, oh my god, it's all the original Avengers. And my head exploded. I'm like, oh my god, this is genius. Because now it's going to be the old trying to save the new in whatever comes next, which ended up being Endgame. And I was like, oh my god, that's brilliant. How they saved the original Avengers to then have one last hurrah, one last mission. So I commend the movie for who they killed, because it then set up for great stuff in Endgame, because they saved the right characters for after. Also, Hawkeye was not in this movie, and he was there in the first Avengers, and they won. He was there in Ultron, and they won. He was there in Endgame, and they won. He was there at Civil War on Team Cap, and Team Cap won. He was not there in Infinity War, and they lost. Hawkeye is the most important member of the Avengers.
You know what?
But that's another argument.
Yep. He's the
You know
good luck
what?
charm. But
That sounds amazing.
before we get to proving why he's the good luck charm, we do have to tackle Ant-Man and the Wasp.
Which is like the thin mint that you have after a big meal.
Yeah, it really was. Like,
Is it?
like, this was such a fun movie, but it was like, this is some poor timing. Like,
Yeah.
Say as Ant-Man and the Wasp, kind of forgettable. I liked it, very forgettable.
Yeah.
Loved the post-credit scene. That shit gave me chills. I was like,
Oh,
oh,
yes.
Yeah.
oh no! Like it was the entire movie was kind of the when I watched it for the first. I didn't even see it in theaters. I watched it at home. I was on my phone through half the movie because I was like, it's funny, it's good, but I'm not like thrilled with it. But that post-credit scene, I was like, oh my goodness! Like it really just, I was really just.
I like this movie more than the first Ant-Man, but only by a tiny bit. I didn't really love the first Ant-Man, but I did enjoy this movie a bit more. I love the dynamic between Scott and Hope, Ant-Man and Wasp, obviously the title characters. I think the movie falters a bit by having like three different villain subplots, which is really, really awkward. Because you have like Ghost, the main villain, and then you have the Walton Goggins character who like is trying to like steal the lab, and then you also have the FBI trying to catch Scott not being on house arrest. Also, props this movie for introducing Jimmy Woo. But I think the movie's just too busy. I do enjoy it though; it is a fun time. But I mean, I don't know if it's a good or a bad thing to say that my favorite scene in the movie was also the post-credit scene because that shit was wild. I was not expecting that, and that was so good. But yeah, it's another fun Marvel adventure, and I can't fault the movie for that. It did what it set out to do. So
Yeah.
Found out what happened to Ghost. I was like, I'm trying to think because I'd be really interested in that aspect of it.
Yeah.
I think she's
Yeah.
a really interesting character.
Yeah. This movie is also really important because it sets up the quantum realm, which is the
Yes.
key to everything. So you kind of needed this movie before Endgame to be like, hey, quantum realm exists. This will come into
There's a
play
whole
later.
theory with Loki in the
Um,
quantum realm that the time variance thing
Yeah.
is located
Yeah.
in the quantum realm because time moves differently in there. I saw that somewhere and I thought it was
Yeah.
interesting.
Yeah.
That'd be interesting. Yeah.
But like
Sean, your thoughts?
the only like I liked this like to keep it really short. I liked this movie. I liked it like the same amount as I liked the first Ant-Man. I view them as like part 1, part 2, but stacking Ant-Man and the Wasp against the rest of Phase 3, it's pretty low. The only thing that is like I liked this movie. It was fun. It was a thin mint. It was a thin mint between meals, but it just like our next film we're going to discuss. It just felt like oh wait, we forgot to explain this one thing. Quick, show your work, and that's what this was. Like,
Oh, your work.
it's like it's just like that's neat, but I can't give you full credit on this math problem unless you show your work, sweetie. And then we got this movie. I was like, this is a neat
Yeah.
way to show your work, but could we have done this before? Like, meh.
Yeah.
I like this one just suffers from poor placement. That's all.
Yeah. No, that's fair. Also, it came out like only like 2 or 3 months after Infinity War, and then we had no Marvel movies for about a half a year plus because
Yeah.
Captain Marvel then came out in March of the following year,
Captain
meaning that
Marvel.
we had, I think if I'm counting correctly, 7 months. I think we had 7 months in between the two movies, and Captain Marvel came out early March of 2019. And obviously, we knew this movie was coming because of the post-credit scene that was set up for us in Infinity War. And I thought this movie was, in 2 words, painfully average. I wanted it to be good. I really did. But I just didn't quite connect with the character of Carol Danvers.
Yeah.
I thought that the character was not as well written as she could have been. I don't fault Brie Larson, I fault the writing. And I didn't really like the fact that she's an amnesiac who can't remember what she came from. I think the script could have benefited from us figuring it out with her as opposed to us being shown her whole backstory in the beginning and then just watching her figure it out. It's very much less interesting.
Yeah.
If we also came into this movie with her past as a mystery and then we followed along with her and figured stuff out with her, it would have been much more interesting. But because it didn't do that, I wasn't the biggest fan.
I agree
Overall,
with you.
though, I thought it was painfully average.
It's for a movie that has so much importance to the Marvel universe. It is so mediocre.
Thank you.
And the thing is, the problem with that is I like Captain Marvel as a character. I do. I think she has potential to be a really great piece in this universe. But to introduce something that is just so incredibly important to everything going forward, to make it just so underwhelming is disappointing. With the scrolls, those are I did like how they introduced them, and I think they have I like how they played parts in things going forward. But it could have been better, and if it was placed in a different part, it would have been so much better. Because it just felt like a kick in the like a kick in the face, a slap in the face. Like it just didn't. I don't know. It was hurtful. I was like, "Are they doing this on purpose? Like, are they doing this to make fun of me? Like, kick me while I'm down?" I'm confused.
Yeah, I agree with I agree with a lot of what you guys said, but one thing stood out to me. It wasn't Brie Larson's fault. It was the writing's fault. It's really sad when your titular character has the worst writing in the film. Like, I cared more about Talos the entire time than I did Carol Danvers. I didn't. This was the first Marvel movie that I found myself not caring about. Like, I sat through this in the theater. And I couldn't. I was like, I remember this was probably one of the only times in a Marvel movie where I found myself looking at my watch multiple times. I just like, this is neat. Like, scrolls. Like, I'm tired of this. Like, please, can we get to Nick Fury getting his eye ripped out? Can I see that? Oh, it was just a cat scratch. I mean, that's fitting, but like, okay, like. Sure, it's funny, but like, really? Okay, fine, sure, we'll take it. I don't care about this. Also, is it just me, or does Carol Danvers kind of feel like a bitch at times? Like,
Yes.
I get that she's like supposed to be Captain Marvel and she's strong and independent, but like, there's a difference between being strong, independent, and a good character, and being a really bitchy cardboard cutout. Like, you could have
trying
done
really hard.
Yeah.
And I can say this as a woman because I am. Okay, they were trying really very hard to become such a feminist piece. I'm saying this as a feminist, and I think they did a really terrible job at it. I think there was a way to approach it, and I don't think they did a great job at it. I think they were trying to make that cultural impact that Black Panther had with women, and I don't think it hit. It was just kind of like, oh, this is very. She's portraying something that we don't like, that we're not impressed by. Like, this is something that I actively try not to be like. I don't know how else to put that, but she's a very strong, very independent woman, but she approaches it poorly, and almost in a rude manner. And it's like one step forward, two steps back with her. It feels like I wasn't thrilled with the way they attempted to approach it.
I agree.
I agree.
Before we move on, I'll just cap it off with like, this probably was like one of the only Marvel films I slightly dislike, and I've seen the original Hulk. Like, this is probably the only ones that I actually find myself not wanting to watch it ever again. Like, I'll sit through.
I have not seen it since theaters.
I've not seen it since theaters either, and I didn't want to. I didn't want to ever see it again. Like, I'd rather watch Thor: The Dark World again, and it's Thor: The Dark World. Like, like,
ouch.
It's not, and I'm not saying this is
I don't know.
I'm just saying I don't like it. No, I'd rather watch Thor: The Dark World again. Thor: The Dark World has its moments. This movie doesn't have moments.
Yeah, fair enough.
But now we can complain about the lack of showed work because we're finally at the point where it all mattered. Endgame.
Dude.
This beautiful movie.
You
want to cry? You want to cry for 181 minutes? This movie.
I have never cried during a movie more than this one. I think I can honestly, genuinely say, I don't think I've ever cried at a movie more than I cried at Endgame toward the end. But let's not talk. I truly, this might be a controversial statement, but I don't care. I think this is the most satisfying movie ever made. And there's a term in film that gets tossed around a lot that usually is greeted with negative connotations or correlations. And that's fan service. Why is fan service all of a sudden a bad thing? These fans have been along with you for 19 movies, 20 plus movies. Why wouldn't you want to serve your fans? This movie has so many fantastic moments of fan service that I loved. It's so good. All the time travel stuff when they literally like, oh, you wanted to complain about fan service? Let's literally make the plot of our movie fan service. Let's have us go through all the movies we've already seen. Like, let's just make oh, you think this is going to be compared to a lot of time travel movies? We'll directly reference Back to the Future in this movie. How about that? Like, I just love the balls that this movie had. And I think it is the most satisfying conclusion to a franchise ever. I think it's more satisfying than Return of the Jedi. I think it's more satisfying than Return of the King. I truly do. This is perfect, and it ends the arcs of two characters, that being Tony and Cap. I wouldn't change a thing. I wouldn't change it because Tony, throughout all the MCU, has been said that you're not the guy to make the sacrifice play. You're the guy that only thinks for himself. And what does he do? He sacrifices himself to save the planet, save the world, save the universe. And what does Cap do? He's always said he wanted a normal life, but he was always forced into being a super soldier, and then that life was ripped away from him. Well, let's give him that normal life. Let's have him live a life with Peggy Carter and then have him hand the shield to Sam. I think the ending of those two characters is perfect, and I thought that the scene of Cap and Peggy dancing in his house to the song that was playing in the first Avenger is the best ending that this movie could have had. And, I mean, we'll get to more, but that's my opening spiel. I don't think I would change a thing about this movie's last, 30, 45 minutes. I think the ending is perfect, and I like it more. I know everyone says Return to the King is the best finale in film history, and everyone loves that movie. That movie had 8 different endings. I don't know what ending they're talking about when they say that, but I think that this movie has the best ending of all time, and it just leaves me so pleased and so happy to be an MCU fan because this movie did everything I wanted it to do.
I'm going to wholeheartedly disagree with you.
After all that, the betrayal.
That's fair.
I respect a lot of what you said, and I understand. My biggest plate with this movie is how they ended Captain America. I don't think they should have done it. I'm angry about it. He wouldn't have left Bucky like that. Throughout the entire Captain America arc, it has been about Bucky. It's been about saving Bucky. It's been about making him realize who he was. And know what? He realized who he was. I'm going to leave him. It's been great. Let me leave you with this stranger that you barely know and kind of don't like. It just doesn't feel... And then to go back to... I get it, he loved Peggy. But then to go back to her for... It just doesn't... It doesn't feel right. His whole... I feel like it ruined his arc, almost. Because it was him...
Wow.
I feel like I watched him become used to this time... This era of time. It was him becoming used to that. It was him. He was no longer dated. He fit in this timeline, in this universe that this period of time that he had been put in, and then he just went back. It just didn't. That wasn't satisfying to me. It felt wrong. I think he should have stayed. I understand why he couldn't have. And I understand why people like it. That ending scene with him dancing with Peggy is beautiful, and I cried. It was very emotional. But it just didn't, I don't know. It didn't hit home to me, I think. It was a betrayal of everything that I've seen with Captain America. And I don't even like Captain America that much.
I see your point, but I do want to just say that throughout all of the MCU, Cap really has been the guy that has helped others and done things for others, because he helped Sam, he had helped Bucky, he had helped the Avengers, when he was on the side of I want to work for myself, he was then told by everyone, no, screw you, and then he was forced to become a vigilante, something he didn't want to do. I think that this ending signified that he was finally doing something for himself. And I thought that because he had always said from the beginning that he just wanted to serve and that he wanted to lay down his life for people. And then throughout the whole journey, he had realized, no, I want to do something for me. But he kept being drawn into having to do things for others, having to help Bucky, having to help Sam, having to help the Avengers, having to do this, having to do that. And then at the end, he's finally like, you know what? I'm going to do something for me. And that might be selfish. I see your point, but I think that that's a great ending for him because he finally got to make his own choice about his own destiny. Because he didn't choose to go in the ice and wake up 70 years ago. He didn't choose to do all this stuff and be forced into this life he didn't want to do. I liked that ending for him, but I understand your point. I think that it's valid, but
Correct me
I
if
just
I
disagree.
am incorrect, but would him going back to be with Peggy, wouldn't that screw up an entire timeline since she had had kids? Or were those
Yes.
Steve's kids? Because
No,
that's where it throws me off, because doesn't that...
It completely screws over the timeline.
It just completely screws over the timeline.
Did Peggy have kids?
Peggy had kids, yeah.
Because
Yeah.
Sharon's not.
She had a husband and...
Because Sharon.
I thought she had a husband and kids.
She
Because
did.
Sharon's not her kid. Sharon's
No.
her niece.
Yeah, no, she had
Yeah,
kids.
she had a husband and kids, so
Um,
that just screws up that whole timeline. That screws up her happiness.
That's something. That's something else that I do want to bring up. Also, is the whole timeline thing with this movie because if you do think about it, your brain does start to hurt. And I understand that people are like, you can nitpick this movie to death. Absolutely. If you wanted to, you could point, nope, that's stupid, that's stupid, that's stupid. You could be that person. This might just be a fault of mine, but I'm not that person. I go to movies to have fun. I go to movies to enjoy them. And even though, yes, this thing maybe doesn't make total sense, I kind of didn't care. Because I thought it was a great ending. And even though, yeah, it might F up some logic, I go to these movies to have fun, and, you know, oh, Bruce Banner's a genius, Tony Stark's a genius, they're all geniuses. Okay, they got time travel, like, you know, whatever. Like, I'm not the person that wants to nitpick. I don't want to be that guy that is just like, here's what's wrong about Avengers Endgame, and here's why this is wrong, and here's why this is wrong. I just want to go to these movies and have fun, because that's what they
I can
want me to
understand
do.
that.
So, that's
No,
my
I
spiel on
I
that as
understand
well.
and I respect that, and I don't like to nitpick movies too much either. I do think he deserved to be selfish. Back to the other point you made, he did deserve to be selfish, and he deserved to have that happiness in his life, 100%. It just I would just be repeating what I've already said. It just didn't feel like the correct way to go about it. But
We haven't heard from
yes,
Sean yet. Sean, how are
Basinger.
you?
I was content to let you guys duke it out. I mean, like, I love this movie. I agree with the fan service theme. I do, though, like, the logical part of my brain does agree a lot with, like, the argument made for Cap's arc and the time travel and that screwing up the whole thing, which I guess, like, Loki is now trying to explain why that can happen. But my overall thing before we push to the final film, I guess, is, like, I love this movie to death. I was with Connor, Colleen, and our friend Nathan, and a couple others, like at the opening night of this. Like, we went to see it the first night in theaters, and it was the greatest experience I've ever had in a movie theater in my life. And I will forever remember that night as probably being one of my favorite, like, things I've ever done. But I love this film. I've rewatched this film so many times because I like seeing all the different fan service things, and I'm a sucker for time travel, so I like seeing all the different details and the continuities and all the things like that. Yes, it makes your brain hurt, but I think it's fun. I also think there's so many little things that you have to keep watching this movie for to notice. Like, I said that I had to study Black Panther because I felt like I had to. I don't need to study Endgame, but I want to. And it's so neat. Like, I didn't even realize this until, like, a couple of months ago, but when everyone shows up after being, like brought back from the dead, and you actually take the time to pause and look and see who comes out of what portal, you can see Howard the Duck come out of one of the portals. And I didn't notice that until, like, 4 months ago.
Yep.
I didn't notice that. And I sat there laughing for a solid, like, 5 minutes. I was like, that's neat. Because, like, he was teased, and we had the credit scene with him. Like, that's funny. So I love everything about this film. I also agree with all of the breaks that this film presents. But I think that that's the point. A film that was so great in quality like this, you have to, like, because you love it so much, you have to put your entire mind into finding the things that it does present, because nothing is perfect. The greatest movies on the planet, the greatest games on the planet, the greatest books, the greatest anything on the planet possesses flaws. That's part of what makes these things great, because it increases the discussion about them, what you can learn from them, because you're always trying to top the next thing. Endgame sets this bar extremely high for some of the greatest movies that could be produced in our current time. But it's those flaws that also make it so great, that make sure that the next movie that will top that bar again will not do those same mistakes. So you must accept this movie with its excellent triumphs and its head-scratching flaws to fully appreciate it.
I mean, the moments in this movie that are just insane, like you have arguably the biggest holy shit comic book movie moment ever when Cap picks up Thor's hammer. I don't think I've ever cheered louder in a movie theater than I did when that happened. The portal scene where everyone comes back is the most emotionally fulfilling thing I think I've ever watched ever, because I've seen, I think I said this on one of the episodes we've already done, I've seen every single MCU movie in theaters. I've been along for this ride since 2008, and having the chance to see that opening night was just perfection. And then obviously Tony's sacrifice is one of the most incredible character deaths I've ever seen. Having his final line be that line that ended the first Iron Man film of "I am Iron Man," I just thought that was beautiful. And I do want to touch on one thing, because I mentioned I had a theory. I had a very strong theory going into this, and I think it was on a lot of outlets. But I had a theory that Black Widow, I had a feeling Black Widow was going to die in this movie. But I thought it was going to do something that was not done in this movie, because as we know, Hulk was not in Infinity War at all, and he had trouble coming out because he was too scared. And I thought that by setting up this relationship between Bruce and Natasha, thought that when Black Widow died, that was what was going to unleash the Hulk again. But in this movie, the Hulk was the Professor. And so I knew immediately as that happened, like, this is not going to be a thing. They figured out a way to meld the two together. I did not expect them to do that. I thought Bruce was just going to be Bruce again. I also didn't think they were going to jump 5 years in the future, but that's another story. But I thought that when Black Widow died, I thought she was going to, and I thought that that was going to be the thing that snapped Bruce and made him turn back into the Hulk again, because we hadn't seen him in such a long time. That did not happen. I thought that would have been really cool. But I wanted to share that because I thought that that was actually a really cool idea that I had. So,
yeah.
But yeah, no, this movie takes risks with Hulk because it turns him into the Professor, and it takes risks with Thor because it makes him fat and comedic, and not at all the Thor that we had in movies past. It took a lot of risks, but I liked it. Even though Thor is my favorite character, I was a bit ashamed to see that he had turned into just this big, overweight joke. In a sense, but he had a really great arc in the movie of, you know, the scene with his mom when he goes back in time. I loved that conversation of like, I'm still worthy, and then at the end when he stands up to Thanos, and I thought that was really, really cool. So yeah, those are my final thoughts on Endgame. I love the movie, and I agree with Sean. It was one of the, if not the best movie theater experiences.
I also just want to put out there, I did really like the movie. I bashed it, but I did love the movie a lot.
I just love how after I'm gushing about it, you're just like, I wholeheartedly disagree, and I'm like, oh no,
I'm going to crush your dreams just for a second.
Listen,
it was funny. It was
what
great.
I gotta do. I did love the movie. I want to make that known. I think it is one of the best movies, if not the best movie that Marvel has produced. But
alrighty.
We have our final film, and we're gonna. I feel like we need to zoom through this because we're approaching the 140, and we still have a whole competition to get through. So let's start.
Yeah, we better get going.
We need to pedal this to the metal.
I will not participate in this one.
Because you haven't seen it. That's right.
Listen.
Yeah. Please go watch the Spider-Man movies. They're fantastic.
No, you're fine. You're fine.
I do need to.
Yeah, Far From Home. I think I like Far From Home just as much as Homecoming. I don't know which one I like more. I think they both kind of are on the same level. I think I like Homecoming maybe a tad bit more. You'll see on my list they're kind of close together. But I loved Mysterio in this movie. I thought that they did a great job of continuing the story past Endgame. I think they did a good job of that. I do have some issues with the movie. I think that it can be a little bit disjointed with like the whole scroll thing. How Nick Fury was apparently a scroll the whole time. It's like it doesn't quite hold up the whole movie. I also think that it's a fault of the movie that the best scene in the movie, just like Ant-Man and the Wasp, is the post-credit scene. But I mean, I commend the movie for being the first Spider-Man movie to not take place in New York because it's in Europe. That was pretty cool to see.
Yeah.
I liked the villain. I liked the Peter and MJ relationship. I thought Ned was also very funny once again. I really don't have that many issues with the movie, but again, it's not one of those movies that really stretches the boundaries of what a Marvel movie can do. It's just another really good Spider-Man movie. It feels a lot like Homecoming. It's directed by the same person. The action in the movie is better, though. I will say that sequence where Mysterio is putting Spider-Man through all of those like mind games, and he's like seeing all these visions, and like that scene is visually very, very cool. I thought that the action scenes were a lot better in this movie than Homecoming, and I think that's just because the director was more experienced by the time this movie came out. And I can't wait to see what No Way Home does. But yeah, that's my short and brief thought on Far From Home.
Yeah. Far From Home was fun. It was a good trek through Europe. I like what they did with Spider-Man. I like the new suits. I like Mysterio as a villain / fake out. That was super neat. I liked what they decided to do moving forward with this. Yes, there are some problems with it, with the scroll thing, and I think that this was like we said that Homecoming was a movie with heart to it. It was a movie about great power, great responsibility. It wasn't an Avengers movie. This was the opposite. It was an Avengers movie starring Spider-Man. And it's neat because technically he's now the new generation of Avenger. He is the guy carrying on the mantle from that previous team, and it's neat to see him on his first outing dealing with Avengers level threats. But where we get those threats and we get the action we may have wanted to see Spider-Man go through, we do lose a little bit of the great power, great responsibility thing. It's more so Spider-Man trying to be a hero versus be Peter Parker, which I like. It's time for Spider-Man to start kicking ass, but it's just a divergence from the previous movie. It's still fun. I still really like this movie. It's different from the last one. It does a great job of showing post-Snap world, but it's just different. I like them both equally, but I like them equally for different reasons.
Yeah, I don't think we should spend that much because we do want to get to Bloodbath, but that's pretty much our thoughts on Phase 3. That was a lot of stuff that we just discussed.
Oh, that was a lot, so much.
And we're going to discuss more, and I have
We're
to
going
Sean
to keep
gets
this.
a break, but Caroline and I do not.
Yes. We're going to keep this fight very short, very very quick. And I'm of course take the time to formulate your answers, but we're going to be pressed for time on the clock. We're going to wrap this thing up. We're going to get through the 7 questions, and then of course we're all going to give our lists of our favorite Phase 3 movies from least to favorite. But with all of that being said, it's the same as always. The 7 questions, I will be presenting them. I have written them before the show, and the answer I hear first from either person is the person who will go first and defend that answer. I will be sure to let you guys know when it is an either-or question, where whatever I hear, the other person just gets the devil's advocate. But with all of that, are you guys both ready for the final MCU bloodbath?
Yep. Let's do it. Are you ready,
Yeah, I'm
Caroline?
ready. Sorry.
All right.
Yeah, you're good. Here we go.
The first question is a devil's advocate question, so there's going to be 2 choices here. The answer I hear first, that person will get to defend that answer. The second person is stuck defending the devil's advocate, whether they want to or not.
Alrighty.
I want to know, in your opinion, who was right in Civil War, Cap or Tony?
Tony.
Matt is beating you to the buzzer. Matt says that Tony was right. Tony's philosophy was right in Civil War. Caroline, you're going to be defending Cap for this one.
I can do that.
All right, Matt, lead the floor. Why was Tony right in Civil War?
So, as I said, this movie is the one that kind of pushes Tony's arc forward, and I think it's because of how compelling his argument is in this film. Because we've seen the Avengers fight in New York, we've seen them fight in Sokovia, we saw the whole thing in Washington, D.C. with Project Insight in Winter Soldier. And the thing, and also at the beginning of Civil War, where Wanda blows up the building and kills people, we've seen that even though the Avengers might win, they probably take a lot of casualties with them in these cities because of the fact that they're there. They kind of make situations more grand than they might need to. And I think that Tony's argument here is so compelling because we see this guy pull up many examples of how, yes, we might be saving people, but are we actually saving anybody by doing the things we're doing? And whereas I think Cap is just saying, oh no, we're doing fine. Like, it's we have to be there when we want to be there, not when we're told. I think that Tony's saying the right thing of like, no, if we need to be there, we'll be there, but we'll only go to places that we are told to go to where they think that there's an Avengers level threat. And I think that Tony was correct. I truly do. I think that he was the one that's looking out for the greater good and being a true hero, as opposed to Cap, who just kind of wants to go about what he wants to do. So I sided with Tony during this movie.
All right. Caroline, why is Cap correct?
Well, I can understand your point for Tony. All right. Well, the reason why Cap is correct is because he has seen what happens when people who are up there making the decisions aren't actually the good guys, and they don't want to fall into a situation where that can occur again. Also, as we know, countries don't always make the correct decisions for their citizens or their people. Them having the freedom to choose where they fight, make sure that they keep their own ideals in check, their own morals are correct, and while they don't always agree on things, they can at least discuss that instead of other people making those decisions for them. That's all I want to say. Because I don't actually agree, so.
All right. The will of the individual versus the will of the many. Both good answers. I like the fight. But our second question, posed to the both of you, this is open-ended. You may choose any answer that you can think of as fast as you can say it. To each of you, what is the single most heartfelt moment in the Phase 3 movies?
Yondu putting the mask on Peter Quill's face to sacrifice himself.
All right, we have Yondu's sacrifice.
I like that. I am going to go with. Oh, this is tough. I'm going to say, Tony, Peter Tony, being there.
That's a good one.
All right, Peter and Tony versus Yondu's sacrifice. Caroline, you spoke first. Why is Yondu's sacrifice the most heartfelt moment?
I think Yondu's sacrifice is definitely one of the most heartfelt moments because you don't see Yondu as necessarily a big emotional guy or like a fatherly character necessarily in the first Guardians of the Galaxy. And then all of a sudden you switch and you just see this outpour of love for this guy and to Peter Quill. And he's stuck up for him in every aspect, and you're left with a question at the end of Guardians of the Galaxy 1, why did he not let him go with his father? What's going on? And then you just see him, that his entire goal was to save Peter Quill from his own father, and it also brings up the thought that family doesn't necessarily mean blood. Family can be the person who just raises you, and his sacrifice, I think, really showed Peter that he didn't need his father, that his father was there the entire time. And I think that with audience members, and that's something that a lot of people can relate to. I know it's something that my own family can relate to. And I think it was very just personal. They really made it that people could relate to that part of the movie. And it was heart-wrenching and it was heartbreaking and just overall impressive.
Very, very nice.
Really good answer. Really good answer. I said the Mr. Stark "I don't feel so good" line in in Infinity War. And I think that it is so heartfelt because you're seeing the culmination from Civil War to now of just how much Tony cares about Peter and how much Peter cares about Tony, because Tony's never had a kid in his life. He never thought he would. And Peter has not really had a dad for the recent years when Uncle Ben has passed away. He's been looking for a father figure. And you're seeing the climax of their relationship in terms of the arc that they've been going on. And you see Tony with his almost unofficial son in his arms, basically begging for his life, saying, "Please, I don't want to go, sir, I don't want to go." And it is just so gut-wrenching seeing that, because you're seeing a kid beg for his life in his unofficial father's arms, and Tony seeing the kid that he was trying so hard to save, and he couldn't save him. And it tugged at my heartstrings in a different way than Yondu. Yondu is the one that makes you feel like very heartwarming. This one's very heart-wrenching. It's very much so, gets like underneath your skin and just be like, oh my goodness, this is just so, like, it makes you feel very, very bad. But I don't think there's a more emotional scene in the MCU than that one. And it's a line that's been quoted by many people. Mr. Stark, I don't feel so good. I'm going with that one.
Good answer.
Very good answers. Heart-wrenching and heartwarming, both heartfelt. Our third question, kind of along the same lines, but less on the emotional side. I will accept any answer, but you cannot name a character who was in the original Avengers lineup. So picture the circle scene from the Battle of New York. You cannot say any of them. That is Hawkeye, Black Widow, Hulk, Thor, Cap, and Iron Man. Other than the original Avengers team, throughout the entirety of the MCU up through the end of Phase 3, who had the best character arc, the best character growth?
Wanda Maximoff.
Doctor Strange.
Wanda Maximoff and Doctor Strange. I heard Wanda Maximoff first.
Amazing. I don't think it's really arguable that Wanda Maximoff doesn't have the best character arc with everyone. She started off literally brainwashed into thinking that the Avengers were these terrible people. Her parents died, and she had seen the bomb in front of her face. It said Tony Stark. Or not Tony Stark, it said Stark Industries. And she grew up loathing these people. She went and she volunteered herself to quite possibly die for the fact that she hated the Avengers and hated Stark Industries. And her brother died for these people. And she was still able to realize and to understand that my viewpoint on this is incorrect. She was able to listen to the Avengers, and she was able to absorb that, even though from a kid she was traumatized and into believing that these people were horrific, and rightfully so. But she was able to go forth and change her viewpoint and then fight with the Avengers. And even though her brother sacrificed himself for Clint, saw that he made that sacrifice, was devastated of her brother's loss, and still proceeded to work with these people. I think it's admirable, and I don't think that many other people in the MCU universe would have done that.
Well spoken.
So I'm going with Doctor Strange, and I think that he clearly has one of the best arcs, if not the best arc, because as we already explained, in his own movie, he has a fantastic arc. He goes from a selfish, borderline asshole, almost more so than Tony in Iron Man, the first Iron Man film. He is completely, almost irredeemable, and he has almost no traits that make him likable, and by the end of the movie, he still is kind of a prick, in a sense, but he has grown and he's able to become a hero. He's able to find out his full potential. He's humbled by what he sees from the Ancient One. And I think he has a great arc in his own movie. And then when we go into Infinity War, the whole time he says, if I had to choose between you, as in Tony, Peter, the Guardians, or the Time Stone, I'm choosing the Time Stone, no questions asked. And even though he does stick to that, he does, though, care about Tony, Peter, and the rest of the world. He wants to save everybody. And he goes from someone who only really wants to save his patients because it makes him look good at work to actively trying and willing to sacrifice himself and the Time Stone on a 1 in 14 million chance to save the world. I think it's really commendable. He by far becomes the most important character in the MCU by the time you get to Infinity War and Endgame, because without him, I don't think they win. I really don't. Because he's the only one that understands that we may have to make some sacrifices if we're going to be the ones to come out on top. And I think Doctor Strange has a beautiful arc, and I would say that he is the one with the best outside of the OG6.
Very well. Very well. Good answers from the both of you. I really like your points. Our next question for the gauntlet is a little bit strange, and I know we ragged on these kinds of movies earlier tonight, but you both get to make an additional movie inserted into Phase 3. However, it takes place during the events of Infinity War, just like Ant-Man and the Wasp. What is that movie?
Oh, God.
My brain can't comprehend that.
So
it takes place during the events of Infinity War, so no one in Infinity War can really be in this movie then.
yes, it is a challenge in and of itself. It can be a new character, it can be anything, it can be any idea you have, but it takes place during Infinity War, just like Ant-Man and the Wasp.
Jeez. You might need to cut some of this out, Sean, because this might take a while to think of something.
Yeah, I'm like
That is fine.
completely brain dead from that.
Like legitimately cut something out, because I don't know if we're going to think of something like within the next minute, because I need to think.
I've written the timestamps down just in case.
Thank you. Goodness me. I did ask this question for Phase 2, so I guess it makes sense.
Thor
that you bring this
4.
back.
Not actually.
Or 4.
Thor 4. I would like... No, that's stupid.
I knew this would be a curveball question, but I really didn't
No,
expect
I'm just trying to think of an answer that actually makes sense.
All right, I'm gonna
And then
go
I-
on. It's gonna be a joke. I'm going with the Hulk movie. I want a Hulk movie.
during the events of Infinity War. It could be like tangential, like it can be slightly before, slightly after if it needs to be.
Nah, slightly after. I want some excuses to it. So I want. Ooh, do we want Bruce or should we do a Hawkeye?
I am going to say
I'm gonna go with a Hulk.
It can be even during
A
the
Hulk?
Snap era if you want.
a Hulk movie.
The Hulk
It could be during the Snap
I
era.
will make it easier. It can happen as early as during Infinity War, or it can happen like a year into the Snap.
Hawkeye.
Yeah.
Ronin.
Yeah, I'm going Hulk.
We have Ronin and we have Hulk. Very well then. I heard Hulk first. Or no, sorry, I heard Ronin first. My mistake.
Okay. Yeah, you're gonna need to edit that. I'm sorry, but
No,
okay,
I think we'll keep it in. It'll be funny.
For those of you listening, by the way, we spent about 2.5 minutes of Caroline and I just thinking like, oh God, what the hell are we
Well,
going to pick
they're
here? But
gonna hear it. I think I'm gonna
going
leave
to
it in.
go with a Hawkeye movie because, as we saw, this is the only thing is you're going to probably have to change the opening scene from. As we saw Hawkeye's family disappear, you're going to have to make that part of now this movie because I want to see Hawkeye lose his family, have to deal with that, and then how he became the assassin killer Ronin persona that we see in that one brief scene in Tokyo during Endgame, because oh my God, that might have been one of the best scenes in the movie, and I want to see more of that. I want to see a Jeremy Renner-led movie where you get to see him slowly descend into almost this villain persona, this assassin persona, something that we haven't seen Hawkeye do ever, is show total loss and total grief because we saw all of Ultron with him and his new family and how happy he was. Had that stripped away from him, how is he going to deal with that? We didn't see that. That was off screen. What if we have the chance to see it in a nice 2-hour movie that I would like to call Ronin, a Hawkeye story? I don't know. It's a work in progress, but I would like to see that movie because I think that you could really, really explore a lot with that. See some new settings, and also the action would be off the charts if the Tokyo scene in Endgame is any indicator.
All right, very well. We have the Hulk movie. What's your pitch?
I think it'd be funny. I really have no arguments other than I couldn't think of anything else. I think it'd be funny. I think maybe if that theory that you came up with earlier, maybe it sends him, Natasha dying sends him right back into going into the Hulk. Everyone's dead. Well, half the world's dead, and he just, the Hulk kills some more people. Fuck it. That'd be funny.
A horror movie starring the Hulk.
Yeah, I think it'd be good. I can't see an issue with it. I think it could be a comedy. It could be a horror. I think there are a lot of directions we could go with. I'm gonna leave it up to interpretation for Disney.
I like.
I would not.
I
would not be ashamed if I lose to that. I would not be ashamed if I lose to that.
Those are both very good answers for different reasons. They're absolutely fantastic. All right.
Alrighty.
Let's keep the ball rolling. I have a much more grounded, less chaotic question for you guys. This is open to the entirety of the MCU. You may pick any film. I want you to tell me what you think the best cinematography is out of all the MCU movies. What movie has the best cinematography?
Black Panther.
Black Panther.
The cinematography. I am going to say, I think you got to go with Infinity War.
We have Black Panther versus Infinity War. I heard Black Panther first.
I mean, you said it yourself. You were just so enthralled and just taken away by the beauty of Wakanda. Is that cinematography? I honestly, right?
Yeah, you're right. It's how the movie is shot.
Okay, that's what I thought. I was like, I could be wrong.
You got the answer right. You were in the vein. You were in the vein of being correct.
Spectacularly. But you said that yourself. You were just so taken away by just how beautiful Wakanda was, and I think it encaptured so much of their culture and how modern it was. It was beautiful. I don't know what else to say about it. Besides that, it was so perfectly done, and that they created a whole world, that we had never even seen before, and they did it in a beautiful way.
Using my own argument against me. All right. So I went with Infinity War. Cinematography is a field that I would never get into. If I was in film, I would much want to be a film editor, but I am familiar with the field of cinematography. And I think that Infinity War does a great job of showing the action in a way that we haven't seen before. And I think the Russo brothers really understand, but now by this, because this was their third movie, Winter Soldier was very shaky cam-y when filming its action. It was kind of hard to tell what was happening at some points, and Civil War almost doubled down on that, and I didn't really like that about the white-knuckled action scenes. In Infinity War, the action scenes are so grand in scope, and you can really see everything that you need to see. And I love the prime example is the fight between Thanos and Iron Man, Peter, Doctor Strange, and the Guardians on Titan. I think that that's one of the best action scenes in the MCU by far. And also, this movie has so many great tracking shots with action. If you watch the scene where the children of Thanos, Ebony Maw and Cull Obsidian, first show up on Earth and they walk out of Strange's mansion, it's one long 1.5, 2-minute tracking shot of Tony and Doctor Strange walking down the street with all this mad hysteria just all around them. And I love the panicness of that shot, the urgency. Also the beginning with the long tracking shot of Ebony Maw walking through all the dead Asgardians and then panning up to Thanos in that glorious wide shot. Also making Thanos a total CGI character feel like a person. They made him look so well. They made him look so real. And I love the way that they were able to show everything you needed to see, and also they didn't leave out anything. None of the shots left you wanting more. They showed you everything you needed and then some. And the huge grand scopes of Wakanda and the great shots when they're in the collector's room with Thanos, and he wipes away everything and shows the whole place is on fire with the Reality Stone. The shots in that movie are so great, and they're framed so well, and they're handled so well. I really wouldn't change a thing about how that movie looks. I think it looks great. And yeah, I would pick Infinity War for this one.
Excellent. Very excellent arguments. All right.
I love that question.
We have two remaining. We have two remaining questions, and they're both fun. Because we're going to finish this off with a fun note. The sixth question I have on my lineup, it is the end of Endgame. There has been a reception held after the funeral for Iron Man, the funeral for Tony Stark. And at that reception, the Guardians of the Galaxy have incited a dance battle between all of the individuals who fought on the side of the Avengers during the events of Endgame. Who wins the MCU dance battle?
And the Guardians compete in said dance battle?
I will say that the Guardians adjudicate said dance battle to remove them from the equation, because we all know that Peter Quill would win.
That was going to be my answer. I wanted to make sure.
So it's just who of any of the Avengers?
Who of any of the extended Avengers, disregarding the Guardians of the Galaxy, would win the dance battle?
Oh, God.
I'll go with Peter Parker.
Peter Parker.
Sorry. I'm floored and I don't know why. Give me a second. I'm like trying to think.
Take your time.
Because I'm always like, oh yeah, Peter Quill. I can't choose him. You've thrown me.
Who do you think could impress Peter Quill in a dance battle for the ages?
Nick Fury. Can I choose him?
I will certainly allow Nick Fury. I will absolutely allow Nick Fury. We have Peter Parker versus Nick Fury for the crown of greatest MCU dancer. Why is Peter Parker winning the crown, Matt?
Well, Peter has already shown, just with his Spider-Man powers, that he's very flexible and that he could do many tricks. Like, you've seen the scene in Infinity War where he's kicking Thanos. So magic with a kick, magic with a flip, magic with a kick. Like, he's able to do fun stuff. He's able to think on his feet. The scene in Homecoming where the guy on the roof says, "Okay, Spider-Man, do a flip," and he does a perfect flip. You've seen that he has the moves to do this. Also, he's young, he's hip, he's going to know the dance moves that are going to win over the judges. And also, him and Peter Quill got along really well because they both knew what Footloose was. Maybe Peter can pull out some dance moves from Footloose to impress Peter Quill and thus get him extra brownie points. I think Peter Parker's the obvious choice for this one.
All right. Why is Nick Fury taking the crown, Caroline?
Well, obviously Nick Fury is the only correct answer because my man lived through the 80s and the 90s. I can only assume that he has the best dance moves. What's Peter Parker going to do? Pull out some TikTok dances? Absolutely not. Nick Fury is going to kill the game. And I just know he has some wonderful moves behind that very stern physique. I just know it. I think that he can. I think he can. We saw him in Captain Marvel. He looked good as shit.
I thoroughly appreciate the argument that, Peter Parker saw the 80s. Nick Fury lived the 80s.
He experienced the 80s.
Fair enough.
You know what?
Fair enough.
He saw Footloose in theaters.
I really appreciate that. That was an argument I did not see coming. I will be completely transparent. When I was writing this question, my first thought was Scott Lang. I feel like Scott could bust down. So that was my thought. Those are both very good answers that I don't think I saw coming, but I'm also welcoming their appearance. Our final question to end the night, I'm going to ask you guys to use all of your Marvel knowledge. Let's say that in another timeline, we did not get the Avengers and extended family fighting Thanos. Instead, we got a universe where all of the previous Marvel villains stood against Thanos. And it's Infinity War. So we know that they're going to lose. We know that at the end of the battle we're going to get a wipe. But I want to ask you, who is the last villain left standing in the rubble?
Loki.
We have Loki from Matt. Who's the last villain standing at the end of the rubble, at the end of the villains versus Thanos fight?
Hold on, I'm really bad with names, but I know who I want. I'm looking it up. Hela.
Hela. Oh, we're both going to Asgard for this. All right. Last villain standing, I heard Loki first.
He's the god of mischief. I mean, I feel like that's enough argument already. I feel like he has shown from movie to movie that no matter what situation he's in, even though it looks like he literally is dead in Thor the Dark World, it looks like he died, no, he has a trick up his sleeve. He's actually posing as Odin. And it's like, what? He has shown time and time again his way to weasel his way out of situations and try to just get he's grasping at straws, and he always picks the right one. He always is the one that is able to figure out how to get out of a situation. And I think from his projection powers, how he can project himself somewhere even though he's not, like he does in the Avengers, and how he's able to trick people into doing things that maybe they wouldn't. I think Loki is the one that would be the last one standing, not necessarily because he's going to be the one that survives everything, but he's just going to be the one to dodge everything. He's going to be the one that's like, nope, not there. Nope, not there. I'm going to make sure I'm not there because I know that things are going to happen. I'm going to make sure I'm here because I know I could push the right buttons. I think Loki's the pick because he's shown time and time again with examples that he's able to survive through really anything except for Thanos. And I think that he would be the last one because he already knows that Thanos killed him in an alternate timeline. So I think that he would be the one to avoid him at all costs, and he'd do anything to do that.
All right. Why is Hela the last woman standing?
She is the goddess of death. They had to Asgard to get rid of her. Obviously, she is the last one standing. She is just so incredibly powerful. I think that she's the only one that could be the last one standing. Yeah, Loki's a good choice, but he got his neck snapped by Thanos real fast. Didn't take very long. They had to get rid of all of Asgard to get rid of.
I'm just saying.
She's just so incredibly powerful.
I'm just saying, who was part of the team that was able to take down Hela? Loki. Loki was able to be part of that team that was able to escape Asgard, and he was part of that team with Thor and Valkyrie to figure out maybe this is what we have to do, and it ended up being Hela's downfall.
He was really good at escaping. Good job. Hela was really good at fighting.
He said last one standing, and sometimes last one standing means last one that just survived. It doesn't mean you have to be the most powerful. Just be the one to survive the longest, and Loki's great at dodging situations where he might come out on the short end, and he always makes sure he comes out on top.
I can respect that.
All right. A very good, very engaging fight all across all questions from the both of you. Excellent answers. I'm very excited to see who wins this one.
I will say this. If my undefeated streak ends due to this, I'm proud of my fight, and I had a worthy competitor against me. So if my undefeated streak comes to an end, so be it. This was a good one to go out on. At least I have more wins than Sean, and so does Caroline. So
Yay.
Yeah,
Hey, and
it's
honestly,
still
if
painful.
Disney is listening, please, the Hulk movie. Really use it.
I would love
Really
to see
appreciate it.
the Hulk horror film. All right, well, to close us out, with just because we have gone the longest we have ever gone in this show's history, I say each of us just rattle off. We'll go in order of the call. Matt, Caroline, myself. little discussion as possible, just to give everyone our subjective thoughts. List your Phase 3 movies from least liked to absolute favorite. Just rattle them off real quick. Matt, you're up first.
All right, so last is Captain Marvel, painfully average. 10th, this might get me in a heat of trouble, but I'm going to go with Doctor Strange here. I thought that the character was much. I thought the character was much better than the film. I thought the film was also very mediocre. 9th, I have Ant-Man and the Wasp. Fun movie. Gave me more laughs than Doctor Strange, and I like the stuff that the movie did, and it's set up for the future. I feel like Doctor Strange is kind of just a forgettable movie in the long run. However, the character is not. But we're ranking movies, not characters. 8th, I have Spider-Man Far From Home. Very fun addition. 7th, I have Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2. Also a fun sequel, but not quite as good as the first. 6th, I have Spider-Man Homecoming. Fun high school movie, John Hughes-esque. 5, I have Black Panther. 4, I have Thor Ragnarok. 3, Avengers Endgame. 2, Captain America Civil War. And 1, the best MCU movie with the best villain, Avengers Infinity War. Thanos reigns supreme once again. He is inevitable.
Very well. Caroline, your list.
All right, I would like, just as a reminder, Spider-Man movies will not be on here because I'm not going to rank the movie I have not seen. So last for me, Captain Marvel. 8th, Ant-Man. 7th, Guardians of the Galaxy 2. Really good, really funny. Just after everything else, I just think it could only be in the spot. 6, going with Black Panther. Number 5, Doctor Strange. It is one of my favorite MCU movies, but just in the importance of Phase 3, I have to go with 5. 4th, Civil War. Number 3, Endgame. 2, Infinity War. And number 1, Ragnarok. I just enjoyed that one the most. I thought it was the funniest one. Thought it was the most enjoyable one to watch. Probably controversial. Really loved it, though.
So Caroline and I have the same top 4 in terms of what movies are there. It's just a different order. So very interesting.
All right.
I'm a fan of that list.
All right. So my last place is Captain Marvel. No surprise. Above that, at 10th is Ant-Man and the Ant-Man and the Wasp. Ant-Man and the Wasp.
The Wasp.
The Wasp.
Ant-Man and the Wasp.
There it is. There's my foot and mouth for the episode. Ant-Man and the Wasp at 10th. My 9th is Black Panther. I liked it, but I felt like I had to do homework on it, and I didn't want to do homework on a Marvel movie. 8 is Civil War. I like this, but look, I see Matt. I see it. I see it. I know. It's meh. Like, pretty much anything above Captain Marvel is good, but it's just like it was hard to quantify.
Oh, my heart! It's
I'm sorry.
Okay, though. You also had Winter Soldier really low, which
I
is
didn't like
stupid.
It was
whatever.
a neat Bond film. It just wasn't a neat MCU film. Number 7 is Homecoming for me. I like Homecoming a lot. Just above it is Far From Home, and honestly, I could swap either of these around. I knew they had to be right next to each other. I just didn't know what order. I ended up on that, but it could honestly be either or. Number 5 is Ragnarok. Number 4 is Doctor Strange. Number 3 is Guardians 2. Number 2 is Endgame, and number 1 is Infinity War.
Wow.
I really place Strange high up there.
I still stand by it. I defended him in the freaking Bloodbath. Doctor Strange is a great character. I just think his movie is very subpar compared to all of these great ones. So even though it's at number 10, I don't want people thinking I hate it. I just think it's not as good as the others.
Yes. And same with me. Please do not think that because Black Panther was 9 and Civil War was 8, I do like these movies. I have to put them in an order, and that's where they fall.
I'm just surprised because the way you were talking about certain movies, that your list speaks differently. That's interesting because Guardians 2 was high.
I liked Guardians 2. I very much liked Guardians 2.
I understand
the
that.
importance, though, in the phases, that just was not the most important one.
No, I know it definitely was not
But
the most
I respect.
important. But as far as I'm just watching a movie for a movie's sake, Guardians will always bring a very warm smile to my face. If not a tear.
I put Ragnarok number 1, so I can't.
Before we close out, I do just want to go around the table. I'll start with myself, then Caroline, then Sean. it might be the exact same number ones we just listed, but what is all of our favorite MCU movies in total? My favorite MCU movie is the one that I stated as number one, and that is Infinity War. I'm just curious what yours is before we finish. So, Caroline, what is your favorite overall MCU movie, not just this phase?
Oh,
I want to say Ragnarok, but also there's a small part of me that wants to say the original Avengers because that's what got me into it. It's what started everything, but enjoyment wise, Ragnarok.
All right. And Sean, what's yours, if I may ask?
kind of answering in the same fashion as Caroline. The movie that has the most special place on my heart of sending me into this spiral of nerddom is Iron Man 2. Because that was the first one I ever saw. But if it's terms of like what movie am I always going to sit down and watch over and over and over again? Oh, I really think it's Infinity War. If not Infinity War, if not Infinity War, it's Age of Ultron. I'm gonna say that. I have to give honorable mentions to Age of Ultron. I love that movie, but it's one of the two of those.
And that's why you lost the Phase 2 bloodbath. But
Listen, man.
I would like to thank everybody for listening to our episode this week. This concludes the Marvel Cinematic Universe. It's over. We did everything. We did all 23 movies. Who knows? Maybe a while down the road we'll do a Phase 4 episode with all these new great shows. I know myself, I'm watching Loki right now, and I'm freaking loving it. So maybe down the future we'll do some more. But for now, we've covered pretty much all the Marvel content we can, including a full episode on WandaVision that you can check out from Season 1. Caroline, I'd like to thank you very much for joining us. This was such a fun time, and this episode ended up being very, very fun to do. So I'd like to thank you for coming.
Thank you guys for having me. I loved it. I loved arguing.
It was an absolute joy, and you guys really had some of I think some of the best arguments we've heard on the show for the Bloodbath. They were very, very engaging. I'm very happy I settled on the questions I did. I do have to thank Connor for pitching me a few of those ideas. I will also preemptively say I am sorry. I did not include a question he did want me to ask. He did want me to ask a question of like, where would you put Bully Maguire in this universe if you could use him as a character? But I felt like it was a bit too on the joke side. I do appreciate the help though, but I had to cut one. I'm sorry, buddy. Yes, I also will say, as fun as this episode was, I do apologize to all of you who've seen the timestamp for this. It's going to be our longest one yet, but please, if you stayed around the entire time, we love you for it. This was great. This was so much fun, and we have so much more fun planned for the future. So thank you for coming out, and thank you for listening to the three of us and listening to this 3-part series we have done up through this. We have a lot of great things planned on the future.
Yep. So stay tuned as we now start talking about things that are not Marvel. So it should be fun. And Caroline, take us out.
Just remember, no matter how crazy life gets, everything is fine.